and welcome back to Mixed Media Live. We're here for another awesome Tuesday of our favorite things, which is talking about art, media, and anything related to those things whatsoever. And if you are unfamiliar with our show, definitely check out our long catalog of hundreds of episodes, hundreds of topics, definitely, on anything about art, whether it's history, music, movies, gaming, I don't know, like everything you could possibly think of with relating to those things. And today, I'm going to throw a further wrench into our already unfocused podcast by talking about roller coasters later on in this stream. But yeah, if you want to, if you take a holistic look at art at all, the role of art and aesthetic in your own life, then this is the podcast for you. You'll find something interesting. Of course, we have things about pop culture and news as well, for the stuff that gets the clicks, if that's your thing. So definitely check out our deep catalog, and hopefully I'm hoping some growth will be happening on this podcast soon, especially once I'm done with my event tomorrow and through the weekend, and I can put some time back into the podcast. That being said, shout out to 5 awesome people who make this podcast absolutely possible. That's Rob Sharma, 99 Crime, Post, Kai, and Alex Egbert, who support us at Mixed Media Podcast, or mixedmedia.locals.com. I'm tired today, so I'm probably going to mess up words all over the place. And if you'd like to support as well, you can go to mixedmedia.locals.com, or if you're on Rumble, there's a big salmon-colored button at the bottom of the video. And I see y'all out there watching the videos and stuff, and that's great. But, at least subscribe. But then if you want to see the podcast perpetuate, hit that salmon button. If you're not on Rumble, then you can go to mixedmediapodcast.com for any and all links you could possibly want. With that, we should introduce ourselves. So, my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. I own a company called Ariella. Wow, I'm really off today. I own a company called Ariella, period. Oh no, I muted you, I think. Oh no.
Poser.
Say it again, I muted you. I'm really off
today. Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
My name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Sweet. All right, I guess I pretty much took care of all the housekeeping up front. How was y'all's week?
It was all right. I was sick for a bit last week. So there was a swing dancing event I was supposed to go to, but I was dying. So unfortunately,
there's the next one.
Yeah, so the next one. So there's a club meeting every Tuesday, which literally at this time actually, which is a little bit unfortunate. But there was one on Friday, for just a week. So I was like, oh, let me go to that. But then I was sick, so
it's been a normal weekly thing, like a class and then a dance.
I'm not really sure how it works. All I know is it's one of the Rutgers clubs, so I don't know how they run things. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, try it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You have my permission to skip the show if you need to.
Yeah.
Try it. Ask for any advice if you anything that I could help you with. Not that I'm an expert, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And other than that, Black Friday's coming up, so I might be getting a new, might be getting a camera, considering. I mean, this is it's not good. Okay, the quality here isn't very good, so I'm trying to level it up a little bit. Also, it's just useful to have a camera for other things, anyways. But yeah, using my integrated laptop camera, it's a little bit unfortunate. So yeah, I guess I'll probably be asking Irving for what thing I should actually get, because I don't know anything about cameras, not a single thing. So
yeah. So that begs the question whether we're going to have the locals Black Friday sale that lasts until February.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I forgot. The perpetual Black Friday sale. So if you didn't know, the last two Black Fridays, I set our locals page to go from $5 a month, which is already dirt cheap, to $3 a month, which is like, I'm pretty... I actually don't know. It might be lifetime as long as you do it within the window. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to double check that. So, either way, we welcome your subscription. And the tradition is I forget to turn it back off to the normal thing after the holidays. Even intermittently in between Black Friday and Christmas, I forget to turn it off. So likely the sale will continue on, but I can't promise it because maybe I remember this year. Maybe I remember. So get on it.
There is some legal thing, by the way, about there's a maximum duration for sales because then it's not a sale anymore. It's just the normal price. And so, I don't know what that is. I suppose maybe I shouldn't have said that. But
I didn't hear a word you said.
Yeah, I didn't say anything actually. We're moving on.
Yeah. Sweet. Was that it for your week, Nathan? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Sweet. And also, for anyone else out there, if you want any tech advice at all, particularly with regards to cameras and stuff like that for Black Friday, the only way that you can ask me for said advice, and I think a lot about these things in terms of investment, so if you want to ask about your particular use case, hit us up on the Discord, link in the description. That's the only way. There you go. So for my week, I've been deathly tired because I've been preparing for my conference happening from tomorrow until Saturday. I speak on Thursday, but it's the annual JFK Assassination Conference. This time it's in Pittsburgh, so I'll be in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of drama around it being in Pittsburgh and not in Dallas, yada yada yada. Okay, whatever. But we're gonna be in Pittsburgh, and I had the most crazy struggles getting my 3D model. Basically, what I did to be a speaker at said event. I'm not an assassination scholar or anything like that. Like if I wrote a paper, you should disregard it entirely. But I am amateurly well read on the subject. But that's not why I'm speaking. I'm speaking because I did a massively technical project to digitally preserve Dealey Plaza. Was in Dallas for 8 or 9 days in 100-degree weather, flying drones and taking LiDAR scans. It was rough, but what I didn't expect to be even rougher was the amount of data processing that was required to get this model processed. I ended up having to learn cloud computing, which was a learning curve, definitely. Threw me for a loop several times because it's not as straightforward as I think it probably could be, honestly. And it's also more expensive than I thought if you are doing any graphics-intensive processing. So that sucked. But it is done as of today in terms of the major work. And you want to guess, Nathan, how many polygons? This is unfiltered, raw data.
It's raw. It's bad. It's definitely a lot. Because when you scan stuff, right? I never know scanning myself, but when you scan stuff, it's not going to be some nice geometry, right? It's probably going to just make a bunch of triangles, and just a lot of them, with things where even you have probably some noise too, right? Where normally if you're 3D modeling a building, for example, right? The windows of a building are flat, right? They're just flat. And so you can model that with 2 polygons, right? Every polygon, everything's a triangle. And so you have a rectangle for a window, and then you can make that with 2 triangles. So you have 2 polygons there. But the thing is, if you're scanning something and you have just a little bit of noise, so each individual scanning dot or whatever, isn't gonna make a perfect rectangle. So you're gonna have just a trillion triangles, not literally, but a bunch of triangles, for a rectangle. Now, I'm bad with big numbers, so with such a large project and just like triangles, like I don't even know where to begin with the guess, but it's definitely like way more than it needs to be to accurately represent what it is.
Oh yeah, it's bad. The amount of triangles turned out to be 1.5 billion triangles. 1.5
is less than
billion.
I would expect. But okay.
Yeah, well, so give some context to people who might not understand how large that is. The typical graphics card only is allowed to display 10 million triangles at a time.
Well,
so
that could lead to some complications.
Exactly. So I had to rent a server do a cloud computing virtual machine thing, and with like Titan graphics cards, and it was so bad.
Yeah, GPUs to cloud computing becomes a lot more expensive very fast.
Oh yes, that's what I learned, definitely. But it is done with all its 1.5 billion polygons. Now, obviously, I've simplified the model down to 30 million polygons, so that people can actually, look at it. Well, actually, sorry, I should say the average graphics card can show 40 million polygons. That's what it is. I think I said 10 million. It's 40 million. Either way, orders of magnitude off. So that's going to be great. I will be sharing some stuff from the conference. Hopefully I'll be recording some bits and pieces and things like that. I don't know if I'm allowed to live stream the thing. I originally thought I would be, but then I saw that they just started selling online access to the event. So, I feel like that would I'd be circumventing their online ticketing system. But that's great, because that means the event's sold out entirely. So hopefully I'll be speaking to a sold-out crowd, whatever that means in this context. I really literally don't know what that means. That might be 200 people or 2,000 people. I literally have no clue. So we'll find out live time, I guess. That being said, if you're on Mixed Media Discord, I just dropped an email that I will not share publicly other than on the locals. Not that you need any more context than what I'm about to say. But in a strange and bizarre turn of events, I'm going to be meeting the Alec Baldwin at this conference, which is really bizarre if you know the show at all, because I've talked at length about specifically Alec Baldwin in the past, analyzing...
you have.
We have like a 3-part series of it on the show, plus a bunch of news updates. I don't remember if we ever did a dedicated... Oh, we did. We did do a dedicated update episode where I went over the lawsuits. I read through the suits themselves and explained a few of the legal terms and stuff like this. So meeting Alec Baldwin is really weird. Now, you might ask yourself, why are you meeting him? Is he just coming to, like, I don't know, because he's just interested in this topic and he's just, I guess, announced on his Twitter or something that he's going to be there? No, he's going to be a speaker. So I'm co-speaking. One of my colleagues at this conference is Alec Baldwin, which is the most bizarre. And this is an assassination conference, which adds a weird overlay to the whole thing, in that I don't know what he's going to be talking about. I mean, his topic is apparently something like, what is it? Let's see here.
Why the JFK assassination won't go away, according to what you sent us.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. So we'll see what he has to say about it. I didn't know he had any particular expertise on this topic. I tried looking into it. Doesn't seem like he has any particular expertise on this topic. So the whole thing is weird. And if you want to see any excerpts from that experience, I'm trying my best to not turn into a teenage boy and troll the heck out of him. Because I'm certainly not a fan. So I will lose nothing doing so, like, in terms of like burning a bridge, because I really don't care to burn that bridge. However, the ways I would troll him would just not be right. So I'm trying my best to avoid doing bad things. Yeah, so I will try to get a selfie though. I don't even know if I should smile in this selfie because I feel like that's disingenuous. I have no idea what to do here. This is a very odd situation for me. And Nine Crime says, "What if it's a different Alec Baldwin and we don't know yet?"
Alec Baldwin.
That'd be funny. No, it's actually the Alec Baldwin because someone confirmed. I think he posted about it after it was announced. It was announced a little while ago. I think sometime in September, and then he posted about it later on. So the Alec Baldwin will be will be at the conference, and he was a last minute addition. He was the last speaker added to the roster. So very, very strange overall. I'm not in charge of the conference, but this would not be my pick given the context. He was just recharged for killing someone again. He was charged for the third time all over again.
Oh, they actually filed the charges again?
Yes, they did. Yep. Which would have been a news update. I think it happened not last week, but the week before. He was recharged again. So the context is just bizarre overall. And if you want to see my opinion on the Alec Baldwin case, check out the channel. But if you want the TLDR, elements of manslaughter are present according, in my opinion, don't sue me, in my opinion, based off of New Mexico law and precedent and whatever. Although my overall opinion was, if you don't normally charge for this type of thing, then I'm okay with you not charging Mr. Baldwin. But if you would normally charge, because there's prosecutorial discretion, of course, and this is not really in the same category of most manslaughter cases. Most manslaughter cases aren't an on-set accidental shooting, if you get what I mean. So if they would have charged a random stuntman with the same crime, then Alec Baldwin should be charged because all the elements are there. If they wouldn't have charged the stuntman, the no-name stuntman with it, then I'm okay with them choosing not to charge him. So that was my overall opinion at the end of the day, and I still have that opinion. So there you go. How about your week, Ben?
I think the most interesting thing that I did is not really art related, but I got to co-lead a beginner bird walk with the Howard County Bird Club, and on that, I pointed out that a juvenile, probably about 2-year-old golden eagle flying with some turkey vultures, which is a pretty significant bird around here. So that was fun. So like I said, I've never led or co-led a bird walk, but yeah.
Cool. Sweet. All right, how about news?
I think the most interesting thing, at least it's interesting to me, is that I saw that Christopher Leonard's directed his own animated short musical called Pacemaker. Now, Christopher Leonard's is a composer who's done a lot of stuff, but mostly he's done a lot of time working on like PC games of like popular movie franchises. The scores for that. Although recently he did the music for Rogers the Musical, the Marvel musical that we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess he spent a long time trying to get work as a composer for some kind of animated show, animated musical sort of thing. Something probably I haven't seen this. I'm assuming it's something in like the vein of like, I don't know, Frozen or Coco or something like that, right? Animated film. It has a lot of songs in it as well. And after spending most of his career without getting that opportunity, I guess he decided he's going to direct his own 9-minute short animated musical. Okay, so I don't really know anything about it at all. It's called Pacemaker. I don't know, but I thought that was interesting because I don't know. It's you got Well, so, I guess this is maybe becoming not so much a model or a trend, but something that a few composers are exploring. Like we talked last October, about Giacchino directing Werewolf at Night and writing the music for it. So I don't know. Is that one of the ways of the future, right? If you're a composer and you want to write music for something that doesn't exist or nobody wants to make exist, you just direct it yourself and make it exist.
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
I wonder if some of those people would be more poised to make not independent, that's not the right word, original films instead of serial films, in terms of already having the connections and already being a proven artist. Maybe they can convince the right people in the right boardrooms and get things going, because that'd be super cool.
And I imagine that these people also know quite a bit. I mean, maybe not everything about every aspect of like directing a film. Well, they know more than the average person does, I imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, that's a good segue to the only thing I noticed, I think, which is that Marvel is dying. Marvel is absolutely getting rocked. I don't remember the box office number, and it's because I was so busy. But it was so loud. The failure of the Marvels was so loud that even I noticed it in my busyness this week. I didn't even know the movie came out, so there's that. But it absolutely tanked. Marvel's slate of future films looks like they're just set on making the same mistakes forever. So I suspect this is going to be the end. And guess what? Like 2 years ago, when I was talking about Captain Marvel, I predicted this was the end. I said, Endgame is the end of the whole series in terms of popularity. It's over. Like, the whole thing is dead afterwards. Completely correct. Just gotta say. So, so there's that, and I hope they continue to die. What else? There was something else that had to do with antitrust stuff. And it was a new antitrust case, and now I forget off the top of my head what it was. It might have been, I think it was Google related. And there's basically, there have been a lot of antitrust suits over the years. It's basically, I mean, I don't follow them close enough to know what the odds of this one is in terms of succeeding. But a lot of them try to cleave YouTube away from from Google. A lot of them, that's the sort of the end attempt, which is a valiant attempt. Please cleave YouTube away from Google. But this one, a lot of prominent lawyers are saying has merit. But a lot of prominent lawyers have said other ones have had merit as well. So, the courts for a long time have been extremely weak on antitrust law, and the law itself has been extremely weak for a very long time as well. So, it's all branches of government are kind of lax on this point. So, not a very good time for antitrust if you are a fan of antitrust things. So, that's all I got. How about you, Nathan, in gaming?
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a few things. So in Discord earlier, there was an article posted that was from, I lost the, I didn't close it, okay. Oh wait, I did close it. Oh no, I didn't close it, okay. From a website, and it's titled, GTA 6 publisher believes games should be priced per hour. At first I was like, oh, that's interesting, let me read more into it. I realized, I'm pretty sure that this article was just generated for clicks, and this is not even like slang that's true. So I looked at the article. Is really short. It's a really short read, and it says, quote, during the earnings call for Take-Two Interactive's quarter 2 2024 period, CEO Strauss Zelnick expressed his stance on how video games should be priced on a per hour basis. The GTA 6 publisher's CEO elaborated on the statement by going over how the algorithm is designed when talking about entertainment properties and the customer's perceived value of the product. And then it goes and direct quotes him. And what he says is, quote, in terms of pricing for any entertainment property, basically the algorithm is the value of the expected entertainment usage. which is to say that the per hour value times the number of expected hours plus the terminal value that's perceived by the consumer in ownership if the title is actually owned, not, say, rented or subscribed to. And you'll see that bears out in every kind of entertainment vehicle. By that standard, our frontline prices are still very, very low because we offer many hours of engagement. Okay, and then there's a little bit extra that doesn't really matter that much. It also goes that he says that doesn't necessarily mean that the industry has pricing power or wants to have pricing power. However, there's a great deal of value offered. Okay, now if you read this, like I can see it and be like, oh, okay, well that's kind of bad. They might be doing some or unless you think it's good, I don't know. They might be doing some per hour pricing or whatever, right? But if you click the link in the start of the article, it says during the earnings call, it brings you to the transcript of the earnings call, right? And so I was reading through it, which is really very. I haven't read the entire thing; it's very long, as one might imagine, but it's very interesting. So the CEO has this little speech thing, a little blurb at the start. He's talking about essentially how great Take-Two is doing, basically, is what he's saying. And then the president talks for a bit and also was like, dude, we're epic, actually. We're so good. And then keeps going on. And then there's a question and answer section with whoever was part of the call. And the part of interest that talks about the per hour part is an analyst for Goldman Sachs, Eric Sheridan. He says, thank you so much for taking questions. He says, maybe one bigger picture one first for strategy. You've seen a lot of media inflation and increases in subscription prices broadly in the media landscape. How do you think about striking the balance between pricing and attracting a wider variety of audience when you think about the content pipeline you're going to bring to market over the next couple of years to capture the right mix between those two dynamics? I think it's the second question, which is not related. And then Strauss has this little paragraph at the start where essentially just explaining why we see increases in subscription prices. And what essentially he says is that they were underpricing to acquire customers, and then now they're just like, oh, well, we have customers, or rather our customers are leaving sometimes, so let's make the prices normal in order to offset that issue. That's what he says at the start, right? And then, so the second paragraph is the quote that I just read to you from the article, but they missed the first line of the paragraph. There's like one line, right, in that paragraph for it. And it says, quote, although it has nothing to do with our business. And then he says the rest of what he just said. They just took that out.
No, they deliberately took it out of context.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Because, like, the source they got it from is in paragraph form. It's not like one giant block of text, which is actually kind of nice that they bothered to make paragraphs to people's statements. So it's nice to read. But it just says it has nothing to do with our business. And then he says that. He's explaining the fact that it is cost-effective to play a video game in terms of per entertainment value compared to streaming services, but that's not affecting the way that he prices things. Is what he's saying, right? So I was like bewildered when I read this. I was like, wait. And I literally read the article like 3 times. I was like, am I missing something? Like, are you saying something I'm not understanding? It's like, no, they're telling you that that quote GTA 6 publisher believes games should be priced per hour, but he never actually says that. He says that games are just very well valued, is what he says. You don't say that we're underpricing ourselves, that we need to increase our prices. He doesn't even say any of that. He just says that in terms of price per hour you get, it's pretty good for the video game. That's all he's saying, And he's explaining the stuff with the streaming services. So that was bewildering. And then I just went to Reddit for some gaming news for today, see if I can see anything that I thought was interesting. And one of the top things was this article. And the article worked because if you look at the top comments, people have no idea that he did not say that. The comments are all just outraged about oh man, this guy's making so much money, per hour is kind of crazy and whatever. It's like, I don't know if there's a single comment. There are this post went kind of crazy. It's 190 comments. I don't know if there's a single comment. There probably is one, but I haven't found one yet. That's he didn't even say that. So. That was kind of crazy.
Well, there you go. The power of primary sources, which I've been trying to raise for a long time on the show, is just listen to the earnings calls. Just look at the actual numbers. Don't read the article about the earnings call. Read the earnings call. It's right there for you. And
right.
You'll quickly realize once you start ingesting primary source information that almost everything has a layer of at least spin on them, and if it's not spin, it's just straight inaccuracy, which is disappointing, but that's how the world works.
Yeah, man, I'm sure there's a lot of interesting stuff too to talk about on the earnings call. I don't know, because people ask questions, right, and they get answers. It's like you could talk about the fact that that video games have a fairly high value to hour, monetary value to hour ratio, right? Like that would be interesting. Or rather, I guess it's a low value to hour ratio. That'd be interesting to talk about, because he does talk about it for like a decent bit. Like after that, he doesn't stop talking about it. But I don't know. And I did I looked through the rest of the article. Even haven't read it entirely. Like that's the only place where you mentioned anything related to that. So, and it's the only place they quoted. So I don't know. It's very strange. But yeah. So there's that. Other than that, I found out this is I guess somewhat old news. I found out about this Avatar: The Last Airbender game that came out. That is really bad looking. It is crazy. It has a whopping 57 reviews on Steam, and it's mostly negative. I was like, how did someone give us the green light? The trailer is so bad.
Isn't there a Last Airbender live action show coming out soon too?
Oh,
that was a movie that was coming out. Is it a show?
Is it a movie or is it a show? I feel like it have to be a show. Like the 2010 movie, I think, showed that you can't do an entire series in an hour and a half.
It's a show, yeah.
Oh boy. Well,
so, yeah.
Be prepared for the memes.
This will be interesting. It's supposed to come out next year sometime.
I think it has. It's isn't it done by or with involvement by the original creators?
I don't know. Maybe.
I have no idea.
I remember hearing when this was announced a long time ago.
It'll apparently only be 8 episodes, so it'll probably be longer episodes, is my guess as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You also, the question then would be do you cut out all of the humor, or do you cut out some of the narrative content in favor of keeping the humor?
This is just such a bad idea. I don't know. Anything about this is probably bad. Oh man. Bunch of chats from Kai. So Kai says Endgame was a good end. I hate Marvel, so that's my bias. Kai also says, imagining a company being like we offer many. Oh, okay, that was before you explained the whole thing. And then he said, making a clickbait site just to trap people into admitting they don't read the article. Yeah, I mean, almost everything is clickbait. It's just click driving. That's all it is. So apparently it's a show. 2010 movie was so bad, friends showed it to me just to validate it was as bad as they thought. Yeah.
Although not technically, the score for that is James Newton Howard, and we're going to talk about him in a few minutes.
Good segue. Good segue. So that being said, we'll go over to Ben's segment in a moment.
I do actually have news, which is very unfortunate. We can't really continue the segment that. We actually I segue to other Avatar news, the blue people type, not the bending type. So there's an Avatar blue people game coming out soon, made by Ubisoft, coming out December 7th. I thought, oh, interesting, because they're doing the Star Wars thing too, so it seems like they're venturing into more, like movie content. And I made, wait a minute, this makes a lot of sense. It is the most unoriginal game company making unoriginal games. Wow, whoever thought that they just figured it out. They're like, wait a minute, we don't have to make our own ideas anymore. We can just use someone else's idea. And that might have to do with, the fact that Ubisoft has been kind of stagnant for a while, and so they have no draw to them anymore. And so it's like, well, the draw can now be, hey, it's like the official Avatar game, you can't get that elsewhere, so they don't have to make a nice and interesting game anymore. It just has to be Avatar or something. So that does not bode well for Ubisoft, and I don't know, it feels like I'm just watching them die in real time. It's very sad, but yeah, that's all I have.
Kai says, I mean, James Cameron's Avatar could be ripe for open world stuff. Yeah, that actually kind of lends itself to.
No, don't get me wrong. I do think Avatar and Star Wars both make sense for a Ubisoft type game, but I also just wish I got a Ubisoft type game that was different than the rest of the Ubisoft type games, you know, because it will. Do not get it twisted. Playing Avatar will be like playing every other Ubisoft game, but it just looks like Avatar. Okay, it's the same thing. It's not going to be a different experience. Okay, so
reskinned Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, it's like I really wish okay, it's cool. I'm playing it lends itself to the idea, but I'm not going to be able to help but think like, man, I really am just playing Ghost Recon, but there are like flying things going on and like things like this, like so. Yeah, I prefer that not to happen, but whatever.
Sweet. All right, I'm going to transition us over to the next segment, and I also need to take a restroom break, so I will duck out during the intro, then I'll be right back.
All right.
Sound good? Sweet. And here we go. I think. Hold on. Yes, we're good. Here we go.
Mixed Media Music.
All right. Welcome to Mixed Media Music, the portion of Mixed Media Podcast dedicated to all things music with a particular emphasis on media music and on classical music. My name is Ben Costello. I'm the main host of Mixed Media Music. I'm a media composer and flute player, and I'm assisted by my co-hosts, one of whom is currently not here. He'll be back probably in a few minutes. I'll just, his name is Irving Nestor. He owns I'll just see if I know his line. He owns is a film, filmmaker, media entrepreneur. He owns a company called AWR Productions based in Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. Okay. Hopefully that was pretty accurate.
I think that was like pretty much on the spot. Yeah.
Took me a few seconds. I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
All right. So tonight on Mixed Media Music, we have our review segment, where I review some kind of score or piece, recording, album, whatever. And tonight we're going to be talking about the James Newton Howard score for the new Netflix limited series, All the Light We Cannot See. Okay, so first a few words about this 4-episode show. I had not heard of it, but just the other night, my mom said she wanted to watch it and convinced me and my father and my brother to watch it. My brother did not make it through the whole thing. I did, and I actually enjoyed it. But my understanding is that the critics really do not like this series. Now, it's got like one of the lowest, if not the lowest, score on Rotten Tomato that I've ever seen. And it does not deserve that. There are far worse things out there. Now, my understanding of why the reviews were so low is that everyone was like, well, this changes so much from the book that it was based on. Well, okay, maybe. I mean, I read some stuff about like what the contrast is, right, between the book and the show, but I didn't know about the book at all, and I think the show pretty much stood up on its own. So like on its own merits, I think it was pretty much fine. The plot kind of loosely, we have this Nazi-occupied town in France. We have a young German, who's a radio, technician guy who listens to radio and collects intelligence that way. And we have a young French girl who is blind, and she is using the radio to give kind of coded messages to the Allies, and end up hearing each other, or he hears her, and we kind of have eventually this. Well, in the book, it's more of a romantic thing. Apparently in the show, they not really any romance until like they actually meet in like the last 5 minutes. But that's kind of our tension. And then we also have the girl's father is apparently he was important person at the Paris State Museum or something like that, and he kept the most valuable jewel in France when the Nazis invaded, and apparently this jewel has a curse on it. And probably the silliest thing about it is that we need to have a James Bond or other comic book villain in here. This, Nazi guy who's there to collect jewels for Hitler, but really he wants this jewel because it'll offer him immortality. And he really is just straight up like a character out of a James Bond film. So that's like the most negative thing about it, is that it did not need to have a James Bond guy obsessed with immortality by possessing this stone. But other than that, I think the show is pretty much holds up. Okay, so onto the music. In the same way that I feel like some of these critics are not really being fair to the show itself. Not really judging the show on its own merits. Let's just, before we actually get my thoughts on it, let's just read this kind of compilation of some quotes on the score from some people, I don't know, critics. I'm being lazy. I'm just pulling this from Wikipedia, which I like to do because otherwise it would take me a really long time to find quotes, that might mention the music for like one sentence in the sea of critics writing about the actual show. So I'm just being lazy here. So we have a quote from some guy from named Bellin Edwards from Mashable, who says, quote, "James Newton Howard's soaring score contrasts with the whistles and explosions of bombs and artillery. Carla Meyer of The Rap and Alan Sepinwall of Rolling Stone both use the adjectives overwrought and soaring." Daniel Feinberg of The Hollywood Reporter wrote, quote, "James Newton Howard's swelling score offers no doubt on when you're supposed to feel things." And finally, Gregory Wakeman in The National writes, quote, "James Newton Howard's music repeatedly elevates the trite material." Okay, now my first thought is, did any of these critics listen to the score? Because we got everyone using the word soaring. Like 3 quotes of people using the adjective soaring, and we have and swelling as well. Wow, are you listening to a different score than I'm listening to? Because these are like the last adjectives I would apply to this score. Okay. And also, does the music really elevate the quote trite material? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I would necessarily say that all of the material is trite, and I'm not sure that the music really elevates or detracts from it. Okay. So, on to the music itself. Now, I was trying to think of how I could succinctly describe this score. And my kind of subtitles for this is, I came up with two potential subtitles, and number one is this is the modern score that we deserve, not necessarily the modern score that we want. And my second attempt is, can I buy a melody? Okay. So James Newton Howard, we've talked about him several times on this show, and I think if you've watched this show long enough, you're aware that I'm more of a fan of some of his earlier stuff, and not as big a fan of some of the more recent stuff that he has done. Although I haven't actually heard the score for A Hidden Life, which I haven't seen A Hidden Life, but he did write the music for A Hidden Life. Maybe Irving or others in the chat have some thoughts on that, and maybe I'll ask Irving when he eventually gets back. But yeah, so in general, I'm not a huge fan of what he does these days. I find it just kind of, just not interesting. It feels like it's an imitation of a lot of things without really having its own voice. Just kind of like a mixture of a lot of different things. Oh, there's Irving. We'll pose a question to him here. Hi, hello, Irving.
What did I miss?
Well, I'm going to pose my question to you. How do you feel about the music in Hidden Life?
I don't.
Do you remember it at all?
I don't remember
it. That's the answer. There we go. That is also James Newton Howard.
Ah, okay. Isn't that your constant complaint for him, or?
Basically, I guess it's not terribly memorable because you just missed a sentence. The last sentence I said essentially, which was it's not necessarily, most of his recent stuff is not very memorable to me, because it feels like it's trying to imitate so many things at the same time, in the amongst modern trends in film scoring, that it doesn't really have its own voice.
Ah, okay. Well, that explains why I don't remember it.
So, okay. And I'm not going to say this diverges terribly from that, because we'll see that it doesn't really. But I will say that I think it's, of the more recent scores of his that I'm familiar with, it's definitely the best of them. There are moments that really do rise up to being something great.
Did you talk about the show? Have you seen the show itself or no?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Just real quick before you continue.
Sure.
I don't know anything about this show, but the cast is what the heck? I've never seen so many I guess accredited actors in a show in a while.
Yeah, and then the main character also has never acted before either.
Oh,
and
wow.
She is by far the best in the show as well.
Oh, get wrecked.
I don't mean that to denigrate anyone's performance, but she really does kind of steal the show.
Good for her
with her acting. I know they made a big point to cast a blind actor to portray this character who's blind in as realistic way as possible.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I Irving, you missed me giving my thoughts on the show overall.
You can give me just a positive or negative.
I give it a 3.25, 3.5 stars on my ranking, although apparently I disagree with pretty much no critic agrees with me at all. But I really think that it's universally panned.
Oh.
But I really feel that from what I've read, every critic is judging it in comparison with the book that it's based on, and it's only loosely based on the book. It's got the same plot outline in the beginning, and then it really sharply diverges from the book.
Gotcha.
I think people feel all the critics I've looked at basically said that it takes away all the emotional complexity of the book, and it changes things for no reason. And I think if you just judge it on its own, I think it's fine. Other than the fact that they didn't need to create a literal James Bond or Indiana Jones villain. He could just been a Nazi who wants a jewel. He doesn't need to want the jewel because it's going to grant him immortality, and then literally become a comic book villain. That's the only thing that I really can take issue with.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupting your analysis.
Yes. All right. So back to the music itself. My first thought, it's a really, really long soundtrack, and I was talking to my mother about this very briefly, and she said, I was wondering when we were watching it, Ben's probably analyzing the music, but I don't really remember there being any music. It's was there any music in there? I'm like, well, the soundtrack is almost 2 hours long. It's a lot of music.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get through it. So most general thought on it is that it is very consistent in its color palette. Almost frustratingly consistent in its color palette. Now, I'm not saying we need to I want to phrase this carefully. As a lover of film scores, you do not have to have great contrast in your color palette. Sometimes it is effective to maintain a single color palette throughout the whole film. But other times you can have lots of different colors, and it doesn't have to necessarily be colorful in every moment, but there's lots of contrast.
Right.
John Williams to me is always a composer of color contrast, really wide palette. He's often has the wide palette localized, in a specific place, and also throughout. Again, you can also be incredibly effective without that, but if it's going to be effective to me and it be kind of somewhat monochrome, there needs to be a good reason for that, and I think it's kind of effective here, but like for the length of it, it's a little much to try and listen to all of it. Almost 2 hours of the same color palette. And so, what is that color palette? Well, in general, it's a lot of strings and a little bit of piano, a little bit of melodic oboe and melodic solo violin, and some percussion, a little bit of celesta, and a lot of sound design. It's a very modern score. Like I said, I feel like James Newton Howard is just pulling, imitating trends across the spectrum from modern scoring, and I guess this is one of these trends. It is kind of a similar color palette in a lot of ways to other recent war films that I've talked about. 1917, All Quiet on the Western Front. I would put that in the same general area of largely kind of combining strings with sound design. And three scores of differing effectiveness. I'm not a fan at all of All Quiet on the Western Front. You can hear my thoughts on that if you just probably look up All Quiet on the Western Front score or something like that. Yeah. I think 1917 is a very effective score. I think this is also an effective score on the whole. Okay. Now, some, like, where we're getting, like, the oboe and, like, the celesta, this is kind of mostly in the world of our main theme, and in moments where we're really hyper-focused on the relationship of our main character. Her name is Marie, and her father. And I think the father is Mark Ruffalo. I bet Mark Ruffalo. So here we get kind of this like childish innocence and deep familial connection and love, and this is also kind of connected then somewhat through the most melodic other moment we have or theme we have, which is I think kind of so we have in their childhood, both our main characters, our French girl and our German soldier, in childhood, they're both listening to the professor, this kind of mysterious guy who gives his radio broadcast, and he basically is kind of doing some like philosophical stuff and scientific stuff. It's a very educational program for young children, and kind of quasi-theological, I think, but without like talking about God, but like talking about like some kind of like spiritual light and enlightenment without giving us particular religion. And we eventually meet this guy, the professor, and without spoiling that whole, I'm not going to spoil in case you want to watch it, who he is exactly. But yeah, he's kind of like this voice of like reason and universal like brotherhood and right that, and he's trying to communicate this across Europe, right? And it does. He ties these two characters together, right? So he's an enormous influence on their childhood, and he's an enormous influence on them in their life at this point. So we have a theme that kind of I think is somewhat connected with him and our character's connection to him. So that's where we mostly get color, of a little bit that contrasts with like strings plus sound design and occasional piano. Other than that, pretty much monochromatic color-wise. Now, there's some things that I find really odd. I know that, so this is recorded with the full orchestra. Well, full-ish, like large, group. I think at Abbey Roads, but some of the sound choices like mixing are kind of confusing to me. For instance, the instrument that kind of initially plays our main theme. I think it plays the main theme in like the main titles of the each episode. Is the oboe, with accompanied by strings and piano. And to me, it just sounds like the oboe is like either not a real instrument, which I'm sure it is played by a real person, and like the solo violinist is a really great violinist I've seen several times, James Ennis, one of my favorite living violinists. I don't know who the oboe player is, but it doesn't sound like it's real. Or if it's not real, it sounds. I mean, if it is real, it sounds like it's like intentionally got like weird reverb and like recorded in a totally different space than the strings. And I'm not sure why that's the decision. I just think it would have worked better to have the oboe sound like it is totally natural and in the same room, recorded at the same time as the strings and the piano. I just I could be wrong, and was recorded that way, but it just does not sound that way to me, and I just don't get why it has that sound. And honestly, a lot of the instruments that aren't important, occasionally get like a little bit of like trombones or trumpet, and it always just sounds like somewhat off to me, like it's not like real. Not with live musicians, or it's just like got some kind of effects added to it, and I just don't quite understand why that is. I'm not sure that it really adds anything. So sometimes it just feels kind of canned. Maybe it's just necessary to like make it work with all the elements of sound design that are generally present in the score. I don't know. I'd be really curious as to how and mix was made and like why the decisions were made that were made.
Real quick, Stephanie Costello says, along the lines of the cast, I still can't understand why they have Mark Ruffalo and Hugh Laurie playing Frenchmen. Oh yeah, that's I didn't know that's what they were, but that's really odd.
It is kind of funny that they make like zero attempt to show nationality, like in voice, except for our like main villain, like the typical like I'm a crazy Nazi James Bond villain. I must sound like it and look like it too. But everybody else just sounds like they're Americans and not attempting to put on any hint of an accent. Which I mean, I don't really care, but it is a little bit interesting that that's how they go about it. Like, there's no distinction in between the French and the German. They just sound like Americans.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you can go that route. Like when I've talked about it a few times, but this still reminded me of the famous Russian spy thriller about Nazi Germany. 17 Moments of Spring, 17 mgnienie wiosny. Great show, really a great show, and great music as well. Granted, it takes place in Germany, but they're all speaking Russian, right? The only person who doesn't speak Russian, they have the actor who plays Hitler in like the very first scene. Hitler speaks in German. Okay.
It's kind of like Sound of Music as well. There's no attempt at the Austrian or anything like that. It's just,
Yeah. It just, some people, I guess, might be put off by it when we have, like, this obvious, like, cultural, linguistic difference.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't really bother me.
One more thing, Stephanie Costello also says, but did you notice that issue with the oboe while you were watching it, or only later when you were specifically listening to the score?
I think it's easier to hear when you're just listening to the score, because when you're listening to it while you've got everything else going on, you got a lot of other sounds going on. It's kind of hard to like pay as much attention to the actual timbre of the oboe relative to everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are a lot of moments in this score. where, how do I want to describe this? I guess the best way to describe it is that this is something I noticed with a lot of modern, a lot of contemporary scores the last few years. We have tension, but there's no ebb and flow to it. It's just set at a level, and it's kind of like a wind-up clock, like, or wind-up toy, right? We wound it up and it just goes. And in some of these scenes, like we start off at like a high level, but it never goes anywhere. And I respect like the decision to not do like hit points and Mickey Mousing, so to speak. Whereas there's some obvious moments where we could do that. We could have the music like bullet hits somebody, gunfire, right? Like you could easily do that. I respect the decision to not do that, but at the same time, when we have a scene that is tense but has rising tension, and then it kind of is released. We don't get that in the music. It is high from the beginning, high, medium, and it just goes nowhere. And sometimes we'll have an ostinato. Again, something very common in scores in the last like 5 years, I think. We'll have like an ostinato to add our tension. We'll add some sound design stuff kind of randomly. But it just doesn't move anywhere. It just stays the same. And I think one of the scores that is a huge part of a temp track is a score where I've talked about a few times, and I know I spent a whole episode talking about somewhat recently, the Desplat score for Little Women. I'm pretty sure that's a temp track for a number of scenes in this. But there, the ostinato is very similar in orchestration, but they rise and fall. And things are added to them, and they change over time. And granted, there's no like tension in like the same sort of way, like who's going to shoot whom sort of thing, right? Is this person going to survive this, artillery and being shelled or whatever? We don't have that in Little Women, right? But it feels like there's more, like a trajectory to tension in that. And I like that, and I feel like that's kind of missing a little bit in this score. Now, some other things that stand out to me in it, like some moments in it land really well musically. The music itself is great. And it works really well in the scene. I'm not going to share any of these. A lot of times it's like these are kind of climactic scenes in the episode. But then sometimes it just does not. Like the thing that baffles me the most, again, an artistic decision I just personally don't understand. I'm sure there was a reason given by the director. I cannot imagine that this was not a deliberate choice on the part of the production overall. But when we finally have our protagonists meet each other, right, in like the last 5 minutes, and everyone else pretty much everyone else, every other character in the entire thing is dead at this point, and they finally meet each other, and they fall in love, sort of, and like, why is it like this is kind of like our most climax? This is like the climax of our series here. Why is the music going to do nothing? Like, we've landed all the pretty much most of the other big moments have landed really well. We're just going to do absolutely nothing musically, nothing. And like, you think this would be the time where we have the two characters whose like lives have been shaped by listening to this by the professor. We have the theme, of connecting through him, being like, brought to like enlightenment, about like humanity and the goodness of man, and like all that, some kind of quasi theological thing. We have the theme for that. We have like this theme of family and love, right? That's really important, at least for our Marie, our female protagonist. Nothing, no melodic material at all. Like, and why? This is like, I don't understand. I mean, maybe other people find it effective. Like I said, I'm sure it's a deliberate decision, but it's a decision I don't understand personally. If anything, this is the moment where you tug on the heartstrings, right? Like, this is what we've waited 4 hours to get to this moment. So, yeah, and it's a lot of stuff that like it's pretty. There's a lot of pretty moments, but there's just nothing to me that like really feels beautiful. And I think like that love scene at the end could be like the moment that we kind of break from that mold, but we don't. We actually like abandon even the most melodic things that we do have that make thematic sense to go there in that scene. Yeah. So I will say that I gave as one of my potential bylines for this subtitles, subheadings, right? The thought, can I buy a melody? And that is just kind of how I feel about music in like the last 5 years or so, film music in Hollywood. We have a little bit of somewhat melodic writing here for like the daughter and father stuff, and but that's it. And it's not really a melody it's not a theme that you are going to walk out humming, right? It has a little bit of a contour, but it's just not like I said, it's pretty, but it is not something that is really going to like grab you in the way that like a great John Williams theme or a Tchaikovsky melody can do. And I guess it just feels like it's trying to be two things at the same time. Like I said about James Newton Howard in general. He's trying to have both things. He's trying to have this kind of pretty melodic thing as a main theme. Excuse me. But he doesn't want to go all the way, because that's just not how films do things these days. And, or like Netflix limited series, right? And I just wish you kind of would go commit either way. I personally would like you to commit in the direction of melodic stuff, but if you're not going to do that, we'll fully commit to it. Like I said, it's pretty, but it just you're left I'm left wanting a lot more from it, and like I don't. It's just kind of hard if you can listen to 2 hours of a score, right? Sit through 4 hours of a show, and just not really have much melodic material, right? Other than like when that one theme really the one like a father and daughter family theme shows up, and yes, you could point maybe to like the professor theme as well, but it's just in general, I don't know. I would like a little bit more melodic stuff. And yeah, so I also said I could call it a the film score that we deserve, but not the film score that we necessarily want. Like in some ways, it's like the like the best of this sort of modern world. Like we're kind of like halfway there in some places. Like some scenes really do land really well, and then some scenes we kind of it just does not land, and a lot of it is just kind of there. So like in some ways it feels like it's kind of like an exemplary like version of a lot of recent trends. Like it does things well, but it just I don't know, it doesn't get all of the way there. And I guess maybe that is what we deserve, right? Or something that like is great, but just isn't falling short of like being something truly phenomenal. And there are so many different ways you could do a war film that has like a less of an emphasis on. Well, you could have a war, score for a war film that is about kind of the psychological aspect of fighting itself, right? You can contrast 1917, which I love, with All Quiet on the Western Front, which I do not like the score for at all. There are so many different ways you can do, a war film that is more psychologically driven. It's not so much about like the actual combat itself. You have this, right? I've talked about something like Come and See, which has very, very little music in it. Very effective. You could look at something like John Williams' score for Warhorse, which is a phenomenal score. And so there are lots of different ways you can go about it. And, I think in general this has the right idea. I just would like a little, I don't know, I just like it'd be more effective if we had a little bit more melodic stuff and use the melodies in all the appropriate places, especially like that kind of climactic love scene. And just like a little bit more color in general. So, really good score, but it's just kind of frustrating in that I feel like it could be even better, and it's just kind of a missed opportunity. Now, back to, as I said, all these critics who everyone likes apparently is using the word soaring. I mean, this is the opposite of a soaring score. There is no soaring melody at all. Right? There's almost such little melodic material, period. Soaring is like John Williams, right? So I don't really get how, why all these critics think that it's such a soaring and what's the other adjective? Swelling score. It's not that, and it doesn't necessarily need to be. But I still again. It's great. It's just falling short in some areas to me that would make it that are keeping it from being like a really phenomenal score.
Cool. Very interesting. Yeah, I don't know why such a dumpster fire in terms of, well, at least other people's opinions. I guess you thought it was okay enough.
I mean, I guess I could see I don't know why some things were changed. I'm sure some things were left out as well. But honestly, the changes that they made, everything seemed like plot-wise, it works pretty well to me. It's just a little silly that we have this James Bond guy running around as well. He could have just been a Nazi who wants a jewel, right? We don't need a curse, and we don't need him to be possessed by I need immortality, and he's the only guy who's going to put on this thick German accent and is going to look like a crazed, Nazi. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of Goldfinger in Bond, James Bond Goldfinger, the film Goldfinger, or he's straight up one of the Nazi guys in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay. We didn't need that, right? We didn't need him to be a caricature of Nazi evil.
Well, to be
but
fair,
otherwise I liked it.
My favorite caricature of Nazi evil, which is a very odd sentence that I just started, but my favorite caricature of Nazi evil is Tarantino's Hitler in Inglourious Bastards is the most ridiculous portrayal of a Nazi I think I've ever seen. It is so bombastic. If everyone just wants to have a laugh, just go look up Inglourious Bastards Hitler on YouTube. It is so cartoonish and absurd, and I mean, if anyone can have fun with such a person, Tarantino somehow finds a way. So there you go. But yeah, cool. Oh, wait, actually, I had one question. How old is James Newton Howard? Is he he's in the middle of the pack, right, in terms of the generations of composers?
No, he's not. He's 72.
Oh, wow.
He's been around for a long time.
So why do you think he's sort of always going with the? Is he always been doing that, from the beginning of his career, or?
I don't know too much from way early in his career. Most of the stuff that I know from him is from the early 2000s, where I love his score for Dinosaur. He's did a score for Batman Begins, Dark Knight, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't call that stuff like trying to imitate everyone left and right. Although very different. Dinosaur and like Batman is very different. But like we've talked a little bit about like Lemony Snicket and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and it just seems like those scores seem totally interchangeable to me, and like they probably could also have worked in like a lot of other films as well.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, you want to transition us to the next segment?
Yeah, are we gonna do Arguing with Reddit next, I guess?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, listening or watching live to Mixed Media Music. Definitely tune in next week if you're able to. Give us a like and subscribe. If you are going to watching live and you're going to stick with us, Nathan will be doing Arguing with Reddit, talking about video games and game design. Make sure you check out our Discord page, and you can also support us on Locals. You can find the link there, mixedmediapodcast.com. Special shout out to our subscribers or supporters on Locals: Kay Kairos, Host, 99 Crime, Alex Egbert, and Rob Sharma.
Absolutely. All right, and here we go.
Mixed Media Gaming.
Welcome to Mixed Media Gaming. Today is my Arguing with Reddit segment, where I react to some Reddit hot takes, or maybe not so hot takes, and I see if I agree with them or don't agree with them. Two of them were chosen by my co-hosts, and I have no idea what they are, so this will be a surprise. One of them I've chosen for myself, and I do have an idea for what that is. So, yeah. I guess we should get into it, and let's reintroduce ourselves. So, my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
And my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella, based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
Yep. All right. So, what do we have first?
So I'll do yours first, Nathan, if you want to start explaining.
Sure. So this is from r/GameDev, and the title is the race to bigger, better graphics in games worth it? And that reminds me of a video I posted earlier, like a few days ago, I think, in the Discord. I don't remember who was by or what it's called exactly, but it was about like the evolution of graphics in video games, and I think he was a bit more pessimistic about it than myself, and the idea of like, okay, games looking better is actually kind of a bad thing for the industry, and that it takes up so much time and resource for what he was saying is kind of more of a gimmick oftentimes. Like he was saying that people don't buy games based on the graphics, right? And there are a lot of examples of games that did not sell well that graphically looked really good, and there are a lot of examples of games that don't really look the greatest graphically but sold well, right? And so large studios focusing on that kind of stuff and putting money and time that could go elsewhere is kind of a waste and kind of killing the industry. I agree with a lot of what was said. I mean, I don't think that it's literally like there is value in graphics, right? Like, I guess it is true there are examples of games that did not sell well because of they didn't sell well despite having looked really good, but there are certainly counterexamples of people who have been drawn to games because they looked a certain way. Take, for example, like Crisis. That's what it's called. Crisis. The entire meme of the game was it looked good. That was like the whole meme of the game. It was the whole maybe unintended in some sense gimmick. It wasn't like, I don't think that when they made that game they thought that the graphical fidelity would be. I'm sure they thought it looked great, but I don't think they really thought that it'd be such a cultural phenomena, in terms of just how good it looks and stuff like that. And then a little later you got Battlefield 3, which was sort of a large leap in graphical fidelity, and so that was a game celebrated for that. And really Frostbite engine in general, right? Why is DICE so famous? So I mean, and probably in large part because their games look really good, oftentimes, But yeah, I mean, I think that nowadays we're seeing less of a speed of improvement in graphics. So these sort of incremental changes, or really stagnation, oftentimes isn't meaning as much because no one's like, oh, here's like the next Crisis, the next Battlefield 3 type thing came out. Like it's like leaps and bounds and leaps better than the last thing. It's like we don't really get things like that anymore. So maybe the sort of graphic gimmick, if you want to call it that, is a little bit harder to sell now because there just aren't as big incremental increases. Now it's like if you release a really good game, it's like okay, a really good looking game. It's like okay, but there are a lot of games that also look good now. like that. So it might be a harder selling point. I don't think it's inherently bad for that to be a selling point, right? It's like if I go to I don't know, like for example, a lot of the 3D models I see on social media or whatever, right? A lot of it, like sure, a lot of it may have like some sort of meaning behind it, stuff like that. Well, it just looks cool. You know what I'm saying? Like it just looks cool. I don't know. There's something that's nice about something that just looks cool. And so I may not I may just be looking at it literally because it looks cool, and no other reason. And some people don't make things just to look cool, right? They don't really have any sort of other reason behind. I'm not trying to express some like repressed emotion. No, they're just like, oh, lightsaber looks cool, so let's make that. And fair enough. I think it's a fine reason to make things, But yeah, there's of course the issue of like, you put a lot of resources into graphics. There's a lot of things you can spend money on and time on and stuff like that. And yeah, I think there's a lot of waste in that department. So, especially with open world, because once you make things open world, you exponentially have increased the amount of work for yourself, trying to keep everything up to high standards, right? So, I think. Graphics can be a pitfall if it's wasteful, but it doesn't have to be wasteful, right? It can be useful.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing is like after playing, I feel like I had a huge epiphany after playing Portal 2, which is that everyone sucks at graphics. Like pretty much everybody sucks at graphics. The fact that Valve could do what they did with Portal 2, and it almost feels like it could, like there are like a few odd technical advances that you can notice, like clearly, would advantage the game looking better. But overall, it's not even just that the style is cohesive, although that's a huge part of it. It's also that like they clearly find clever ways, to make things look good that really shouldn't look good, and that's pretty crazy. And that just makes me think that people just suck at graphics,
Well, to the people who supposedly suck's defense, in Portal 2 and Portal 1, I suppose as well, they do have a lot of advantages for the type of game they're making in terms of like being able to do well with lower technology. One of those things is that things don't really move that much, or they move in a very limited capacity. So you think about, especially the start of the game, right? There are no there's no what's the name of those? There's a name for these, the companion cubes. There's no companion cubes at the start, right? That's like almost like the main moving object at some point, right? There are platforms that move, and the movement tends to be very limited in terms of sort of like a on rails, like a very linear thing, right? The companion cube is the most dynamic thing in the game, right? And those little robot turrets you can pick up and whatever, I guess, as well. And so the great advantage of that is you can use pre-baked shadows. So all those crisp shadows and stuff like that, which are very important to making the game look good, they don't have to be rendered real time because most objects are stationary, and so you can bake the shadow map. So how that works essentially is like, so what baking a shadow map does is essentially it adds the shadow to the texture. So it's the same thing. It's like one with the texture, right? Because if the shadow doesn't move, it's like, well, you can also think of it as like it's the texture but it's just darker here, So you bake the shadow, it runs all the shadow physics calculations, and it takes a long time to do that, even for a very simple scene. But now you don't have to do that. You don't have to try to do that real time at 60 times per second or something like that. You can do it one time, and it can take minutes if you want to take that to get a really accurate shadow map, and you put that on the texture, and nice, all your shadows are nice and crisp. The issue is that they don't move, right? So even if you have animated things too, if they're animated in a predictable way, and in a way where the shadows will not interact with anything else, you can bake them as well. It's just a moving texture at that point, right? It's an animated texture on the ground. It gets a lot more complicated when they have like a moving thing that can interact, whose shadow can interact with another moving thing, right? Because then it's not just one possibility, because that thing could be in motion while the shadow's on it, and then you have a whole bunch of different things, and now you have to do real-time shadow stuff, which does exist in Portal 2, but there's a lot less of it, So there's a lot less areas to see giant shadow, is what I'm saying. Aside from that, we also have time. We have hardware advancements, which means that we don't have to think about running Portal 2 at the high settings anymore. You just do it. It's like, and back then, that's something that you couldn't necessarily do all the time, right? Medium settings Portal or low settings Portal, I'm sure, is a lot more atrocious looking than high settings Portal, And there's something else I want to say as well. Oh yeah, there's no animals. There's no humans. You can't see any sort of living thing, which is a big hard thing to make. There are points where you can see yourself if you place portals in the right way. You can see yourself through a portal, and you might notice you don't look the greatest. Which kind of makes sense too in terms of times you put into something. It's like you really don't see yourself very often, and you certainly don't examine yourself very often, right? So it makes a lot of sense to not put too much effort in that. But that itself is a hard problem. So yeah, that might be why Portal 2 looks a lot better. On top of the fact that probably just a go-to art team and stuff too. But yeah.
Sweet, that makes complete sense. I partially take it back, people who suck. This next one I'll pick from myself. It's extremely simple. It is.
I'll say one thing. Sorry.
Oh,
also, Portal 2 is dark. Sorry, that's what I was saying. Portal 2 is relatively dark in most areas.
That is true too. Yes. Yeah. So this one's for myself, and it's extremely simple. It's literally just, what games made you cry? But obviously, if no game has made you cry, felt sentimental or whatever.
Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Not actually.
Oh man,
it has been rage-inducing at points. That was it. No, I actually I don't think so I've never cried to a video game, and in terms of even movies, I have almost cried during Interstellar when the main character, Cooper is his name, right? The main character is watching the videos of his children. I'm talking about that part.
Yeah, I know.
On the spaceship. Yeah, there's that part. I didn't cry then though. I feel like there's some other movie.
Bridge to Terabithia
too. I don't even remember that movie. I don't.
Everyone cries during that movie.
Oh, okay. I think I'm a little bit too young. I remember the movie existing. I remember there's a book too, but I don't think I read it, and I may have watched the movie, but I don't remember anything about it. So, yeah, there's some other movie too. I can't remember what it is, but I have. I also haven't cried, but I felt, I suppose, I was about to listening to the soundtrack for Attack on Titan, because that soundtrack has put me. There are moments in my life where I listen to the soundtrack a lot, and so listening to the songs just bring me to that moment. You know what I'm saying? They bring me back,
yeah.
I'm there again. And also just like it's a good soundtrack, and the show's good. Also, the show ended, by the way. Just I don't know if
I heard about that. Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I have not watched the ending yet, so please say
Me
nothing. So, yeah. So, yeah. I don't. Video games. So, I haven't played many video games that have sad ending. I have watched The Walking Dead, and okay, there is that one. I don't want to spoil it. I mean, it's like a 10-year-old game. I don't know if it matters that much. Also, it became it's the show too. So I don't know. Is the show follow? Is it the same story?
No, I don't think it's the same story. No.
Yeah, the video game also was like a choose your own adventure type thing too. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. Can I spoil it? Is that allowed? I don't know. It's like 10 years old.
You could just give the spoiler warning and then go for it.
All right, spoiler warning. Mute for 20 seconds or something. Okay, it's when Lee dies, and Clementine kills him. And so, we have a spoiler warning thing. Wait, what?
Except it says Vertigo, but
I didn't even know it existed.
I will fix that as you're talking.
Okay. Well, yeah, keep that up because yeah. So it was when yeah. So I will say that Clementine, the voice actress for Clementine, not very good. I will say that. It was the moment is kind of ruined by like I don't know, like I guess hard child actress type thing. I don't know, but like it really kind of ruins the moment. But like conceptually, what's happening is crazy, you know. So yeah, I guess I won't really say more than that. Other than that, no, I don't think there's really many games that have made me particularly even sad or sentimental. No, yeah, I think that'd be it.
Okay, well, I changed the title last minute. At the last moment. Cool. Let's see what they said. So I don't know if you played any of these. Let's see. So we've got Red Dead Redemption 1, apparently.
I was going to say 2, actually. Interesting. I'm not familiar with the story of 1. I haven't played 2, but I'm familiar with the story, so I can get that. But
And also, apparently, Life is Strange. You're strange. I don't understand people who like that game. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's not good. That's not a good answer. I do know how it was the end of Life is Strange, but it wasn't... It's not good.
It's one of the most cringe games I've ever... Sorry to everybody out there who likes the game. It's so cringe to me. And then we've got Cyberpunk as well.
I actually don't know the story of Cyberpunk, so I'm not sure.
Kai says shots fired. Maybe during our swap day I'll do. I'll just destroy Life is Strange for the cringe
play
it is.
Just to like, just to know. Well, at the same time, I don't want to like give them like money. It's kind of like it's kind of crazy. So.
So then we've got Red Dead Redemption 2, Arthur Morgan.
Yeah, that's the character in Red Dead.
Interesting. I didn't know people really loved Red Dead's story that much. I have to look into it. Walking Dead Season 1.
Skeptical, but
okay.
I haven't played it, but I don't know.
Yeah, another Red Dead. Okay, cool. Awesome.
See, okay.
What's that screenshot from?
I was thinking, is it Red Dead? That's what I was thinking.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I wasn't entirely sure.
Cool. All right, this last one's from Ben, if you want to explain.
Sure. This person says, why is there no best horror game category in GOTY? I mean, if it would have been, then there would have been... Sorry. That is not... The sentence is a little confusing. I'll rephrase this so I can understand it a little better. If there had been that category, then there would have been an actual competition between Alan Wake 2, RE4, Dead Space, Dead Island, etc. And the first comment, I like the first comment. It's just what I mostly... Well, I'm interested in your thoughts on that, and also on the first comment. First comment is, or top comment at least, not worth it when people would just complain about what is actually horror and what isn't. I mean, I've talked to users on my sub who insist Alan Wake 2 isn't horror. So why don't we have a best horror game category? And can we decide what horror is?
So I guess it's actually touches on a news topic I forgot to say. The Game of the Year nominations are out, so that's kind of important, I guess. As for why we don't have a best horror game category, why do we have any of these categories? I don't really know. Like, they seem very arbitrary to me. Why is there a best sports/racing game? What even is that? Okay, I don't know. That's such a weird category to me. Best sports game, okay. Best racing game, okay. Best sports/racing is incredibly strange.
Does that mean you're like comparing Mario Kart to like Madden,
FIFA?
2K,
yes.
whatever?
That's exactly what's happening. How like I don't know. It's very strange. Sports games themselves are kind of weird because they all feel like they're definitely samey in some aspect, but also like fairly different too. You know, like I don't know, like they're I understand the bundling them for use in English language, right? But I don't know if I understand the bundling of them for rating them. You know, I don't know, but Kai says, okay, yeah, that's a weird combination. Yeah, I don't know about that one. So yeah, I mean, like, should we have a horror game category? maybe. Like, honestly, I would not care either way. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. They all seem random to me anyways. You know, it's like other than Game of the Year, you know, they all seem like it could be anything. So, so the first comment was talking about like having a disagreement about like what a horror game actually is. Which is interesting because I remember having a conversation about a movie, about like a movie's a horror movie or a thriller. I think it was for Nope. I think it was. I haven't seen it myself, but someone was saying, I was asking like what type of movie it was, and she was like, "Oh, horror or like thriller or something," you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were having this conversation a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, in terms of video games, I feel like there's typically like a lot more. Maybe we'll have arguments. I don't know. Because I'm thinking about the list I was given. I'm not too familiar with Alan Wake. But like Dead Space is a horror game. Resident Evil is a horror game. Okay, I should probably open the post. The text on the screen is like really small, so I can't like reference it anymore. But yeah, I can't. I mean, maybe if I knew more about Alan Wake, maybe it was just more of a gray area. But certainly, like if you're the Game Awards, you can just come up with some like description of what a horror game is, right? And I was like, okay, well, what if someone says like, well, this description doesn't really fit this game that I think is a horror game? It's like you gotta draw the line somewhere, you know? Like I don't know, like you always have disagreements about where the line is, but I don't know, like should Mario Kart be in a racing game category because it's so different from other games like Forza or Gran Turismo? Like, why would you really compare them? You know, like if someone said Mario Kart is better than Gran Turismo, it's just like such a nothing statement. You know, it's like, I guess. I mean, sure. Like in terms of as a game, that is a useful statement. If you're talking about racing games specifically, you're saying like, okay, well, the best racing game is Mario Kart. It's like that's not a very useful statement because like if someone's like, okay, I want to play a racing game, what should I play? I'm not gonna say even I think Mario Kart's the best racing game. I'm gonna say play Mario Kart. Because it's not even like it's such a different experience than Gran Turismo. Someone might prefer if someone's a sim racing guy. I'm not gonna tell them to play Mario Kart. That's the last thing I'm gonna tell them to play. You know, so I don't even know. It's that's a very useful category for that. So,
well, Kai says you could do quote best non-mascot sports / racing game and quote best mascot driven sports / racing game.
So wait, are we saying that Mario Kart is mascot driven? I guess because like Mario and the various characters are in it. And then I guess like what other?
Wouldn't this be a category of Mario?
Yeah, I'm gonna say like Mario Kart is dominating that category for sure.
Wait, I have a suggestion actually. What if we just say sports, and that's just taken to mean games that simulate off of sports? And racing is a sport.
My issue with that, though, is that like racing is such a different type of game than a sports, other sports like a soccer or basketball game. You know.
But each sports game is very different from each other too.
Yeah, but they're that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that they're so similar themselves, but they're more like they're just like for okay. It's definitely very like subjective thing. 'Cause I was gonna say like from the perspective of what is most useful to compare. Like I'm talking to somebody about X type of game, right? Like what is a useful category I'm going to say? I don't think it's a very useful category oftentimes when you say sports / racing game, or even say sports game including racing games, but just saying that to include racing games in conversation, right? And someone's saying like, what type of game is this? It's a sports game. I'm certainly thinking more of the type of a ball game or like a puck game, like a traditional sports game. It's essentially just not racing. That's what I'm thinking, Like if you're talking about racing games, you have to say racing, for me.
All right, question: is Rocket League the sports game?
Ooh, that's actually a great question.
Wow, I think you say racing at first. Like, oh well, no, it's not. But then you said sports. I was like, wait a minute.
That's actually a fantastic question.
Well, okay, what is a sport, right? A sport is like a competition, right? It's kind of a very broad thing. It's like you can probably consider like a lot of games just sports, right? Like I understand that Rocket League simulates like a soccer type thing more, so it's like okay, that's more directly correlated to a sport. But like you could say the same thing about Mario Kart, right? It simulates a racing type thing, The thing that Mario Kart represents is not real, all right, at all. It's not even like close, right? But it's still using the rule set of racing, just like Rocket League uses the rule set of soccer, right? More or less, with caveats and whatever. I don't know. In terms of, but that's the thing. If someone said, can we nominate Rocket League for the best sports category, I would say no, because that's not a useful description for the category, right? So it's not a useful thing if you're including things like Rocket League. I think that it should be something like your 2Ks or your FIFAs or Maddens, the things that are kind of like, I think of like a physical ball game or a physical sport, a physical sport, but then you put it on a video game, that's what I think about, and then mine is racing because it's different. It's different. So, yeah, I don't know.
Kai Cairo says, I guess presumably in reference to Rocket League, it's definitely a sports game. The sport not existing in real life doesn't make it not so, in my opinion.
Oh, man.
I can see his argument, though.
But
he also says, what about best real-world sports game and best fantastical sports game? But then are you going to compare Rocket League to Mario Kart at that point? Is that or is Mario Kart still not in that?
It's just not. It's not a useful comparison. I feel like that's fantastical sports. Well, now you've introduced those two. You probably introduced some Harry Potter Quidditch game. You've introduced Omega Strikers. Like you've introduced a bunch of games where it's like a fantasy game. A fantasy sports game is anything basically. So, I don't know. You've as long as you have a setting that has like a referee in it, it's like, oh, now you have a fantasy sports game or something. So
in that sense, then is like truly like literal fantasy football. I guess it's not like a video game, but like, I mean, I don't know.
The best fantasy sports game goes to insert. I don't know, whatever.
ESPN
FanDuel.
Oh, I think we broke this category entirely.
I don't know. I think actually, if you go to, I'm gonna check this out. If you go to the Game Awards website, I think for a category they might give you a description of what it is. So like, I'm very curious for like a sports/racing game. Like, what do they say? Like sports or racing game? like surely it must be something. Oh, also I forgot their website's incredibly slow. That's nice. Nominees. Wow, their website is lagging. There's something very ironic about that being a video game website. View all categories. There's a lot of categories. Jeez, where is sports? Best. They have a search bar. Is that many? Okay, search sports. Best sports/racing. There it is. Okay, here we go. We have the description is, quote, for the best traditional and non-traditional sports and racing game. Does that mean fantasy and non-fantasy? Is that literally baked in? Is that what I'm understanding? If you're curious, what the nominees are, so you can see like what fits in the category. We have this is interesting. We have EA Sports FC 24. We have the first FIFA's gone. We have the first non-FIFA EA soccer title in a long time, essentially. So it's a horrible name, by the way. EA Sports FC 24 is crazy. We have F1 23, a lot better name. We have Forza Motorsport. Which one? Presumably 5. Why did they not put the number? Okay. Presumably Forza Motorsport 5. Oh, no, wait. Forza Motorsports. We're on Forza Horizon 5. I don't know where we're on Motorsport. Maybe they rebooted, or we at Forza Motorsport 1 because video game shenanigans? I don't know. Forza Motorsport, Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 Turbocharged, okay, and the Crew Motorfest. So, we have fairly grounded video games here.
Hot Wheels.
Other than Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 is the most out there, okay? That's the most out there one.
But did Hot Wheels pay to be in the category? That's the real question.
I don't know. Maybe. Look, it's like, I don't know. I mean, they're certainly a non-traditional sports game. But why is like... So we actually have 4 racing games. The only EA Sports FC 24 is the only non-racing game, which is interesting. So why don't they just make a racing category? Oh, part of the issue with the category too is that it's just sports games. There are only so many that come out because the ones that are prominent, only one come out per year, right? So it's like you'll have one FIFA, you'll have one Madden, you'll have one 2K, and those are the big threes, non-racing sports games, right? And there is NHL and stuff like that, but like no one talks about that. There are 5 nominees, so you need to fit 2 more slots from the big 3 games, right? So I don't even know. There's probably a baseball game too. I've never even heard of. Even though baseball is a really popular sport, does not translate well to video games, I suppose. So,
Yeah.
Kai said, they should be in a category with Mario Kart and League of Legends. There, I said it. Is Hot Wheels modeled on the real world experience of racing Hot Wheels as a kid? If so, I think it belongs. I actually have no idea what Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 is. I didn't know there's a Hot Wheels Unleashed 1. So, let's see if we can get some quick video real quick, just see what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like this category. Why are we even talking about this? Horror games. that was the original thing. We don't have a horror category. What I do like about certain categories we have is we have technological categories, which are kind of nice. Oh gosh, the trailer scared me after I was playing it in the background. Like we have where is it? We have best accessibility is interesting to me. Yeah, or it's like innovation and accessibility is interesting to me. Only have 6 nominees. I guess it's not just 5 per thing. We have things that are more like not genre based, right? Like best game direction. That's interesting. I don't know what that means. But that's interesting. You know, best art direction is also interesting. What about best narrative? Like, at what point is something considered a narrative, right? Because technically, things like League of Legends have story, but they're not story.
Yeah, why not throw that in there?
I suppose the idea is that, like, okay,
if it's good enough to be nominated, you know?
Yeah, like it's like it wouldn't be good enough, right?
Yeah.
What if you have a this is like totally off the point, I guess. What if you have a narrative for a game, but the narrative is really good? Like, oh, there's a League of Legends anime called Arcane, so
you can't count.
It's in the League of Legends universe, at least.
It has to be, the lore has to be in game if it's going to be a lore based thing.
What if you could play the video in the game?
Okay.
Like, as in, like, you know, there's like some buttons, like, just like watch it or something, you know? Like, what happens?
I feel like that's cheating. I don't know.
Mm.
Because then you could just put a mini series inside of your game. It's not the same medium at all.
But like, where do you draw the line, though, right? Because like if there's like text lore for characters and games, right? I'm sure that, like, okay, if that's winning best narrative, we're in big trouble. If there's some text lore for some characters is the best thing we've got. We have some issues, but I don't know, like what if you have a game that like just has a lot, like someone really poured their heart into the story and into the lore. And there's a lot of text you can read, but it's not the main thing. You know what I'm saying? You just could read it. So it's an extra. You know, it's probably hidden in some extra tab. You can read all this lore and stuff like that. It's like a book thing. You know, but is that like part of it?
I don't know.
I don't even know the question, because this is one of the things where like you just think about when you get there, and you probably won't get there for a very long time. So it's probably not that worth thinking about. Kai says, does Dark Souls count as part of narrative if these 2 theories are convincing enough? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, you count Five Nights at Freddy's lore from game theorists. If you know, like, does that count? Because that can be part of the experience for a player, right?
You don't include that for like Star Wars, right? Like, you wouldn't include, if you're assessing the narrative of Star Wars, you wouldn't include like all the fan fiction, right?
That's true. Fair enough. Well, I think that exhausts the topic, but yeah, it's interesting stuff to think about. Well, on the topic, because I didn't say this in the news segment, on the topic of video game nominations, we have an interesting set of Game of the Year contestants here. So we have Baldur's Gate 3. That is my guess for win by audience favorite. Not necessarily critic favorite, although I think it will also win by critics favorite as well. That's my guess. There's Alan Wake 2. There's Marvel Spider-Man 2. There's Resident, which, by the way, so part of Marvel Spider-Man 2 is an exclusive PlayStation right now. It will be released on PC at some point. But this does mean, since the votes are in part based on, it's a combination of, it's a weighted thing where critics matter more than the audience, the general public, but both vote. And so there will just be less votes for Marvel's Spider-Man 2 because you just can't. A lot of people just can't play it. So that's not going to win. Like I'd be very surprised. Although God of War did win that one time, I don't know. I think it wasn't exclusive at the time. It was a PlayStation exclusive. So I've been wrong. There's Resident Evil 4, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which just came out not too long ago. Might be some recency bias there too, or maybe it's a really good game. I don't know. And there's The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, which came out decently earlier this year. So interesting games. There are a lot of interesting categories. Of course, we discussed best racing, sports / racing. There's like best multiplayer, which is like that's so broad that actually does put Rocket League and League of Legends together with everything else. Like that is actually just like the soup of games, basically. My question is, why isn't it best single player? You know, like why do we just make a category for one type of game? And like single player games, that's not a useful like category. I don't know. It's very very strange. There's best adaptation, kind of strange in my opinion, because like not that there's anything wrong with adaptations, but there is this like proclivity to be not original. So that's kind of wait, best adaptation is not a video game adaptation of a movie or a book or something like that. It's the other way around. So they're judging the movies. That is
that's weird.
I don't like that. That is not good.
What
that should be
heck?
an Oscar. That's an Oscar. That's not.
I like movies, but I don't even want. I for the gamer's sake, I don't want to be invading the space of the games. That's horrible.
I mean, it did come out with was it Dungeons and Dragons: Honors Among Thieves or something like along those lines of a title.
Yeah, that's not nominated. They got Super Mario Bros. Movie, Last of Us the show, Twisted Metal, Gran Turismo, and Castlevania Nocturne.
Aren't these old? Or
Last of Us isn't this year, is it?
I guess it feels old. Maybe it was like the end of the cycle or something like that, or the beginning of the cycle rather.
If Lego Star Wars,
January 15th was
right?
Last of Us. So. Lego Star Wars. Oh yeah. There is a Lego Star Wars. Is there Lego Star Wars?
There are. They're like. Yeah, they're like I think direct to Disney Plus things, but they exist.
No.
The big one last year was the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special, and that actually got like some like actual advertising. I think
okay.
maybe that was 2 years ago almost, but I think it was funny. Was a lot of people thought that Kylo Ren got more character development in that than he did in the entire sequel trilogy.
So tough. Yeah, but last thing I'll end up with on this topic, because it related to both the news thing about Game Awards and also actually relates to that horror movie category thing, is the thing that people will actually disagree on mostly probably, and that I don't like, are the best independent game category and the best indie game debut category, because both of them are they're just not indie games in my definition of what an indie game is, right? Because an indie game is independent, right? That is the name, right? And what does that mean? Okay, that means a developer made it without considerable outside influence. That outside influence typically being a publisher, right? These games have publishers. I don't get it. And they're large ones too. So like one of them that's nominated currently is Dredge, which is published by Team 17, which is considered a quote unquote indie publisher. Whatever that means, I don't know what that means. What do you call that? Like an oxymoron, right? Where it's like, what is an indie publisher? I don't know. That sounds very strange. What's the other famous indie publishers? Like probably the one they made Enter the Gungeon and things like that. They also had a nomination like last Game Awards. What are they called? A Devolver Digital. That's the Devolver Digital is also a indie publisher, whatever that is, right? Very strange to me. There's literally a thing on this nominated called Viewfinder, published by Thunderful Publishing. Why? Why? I don't know. So, it has a description for outstanding creative and technical achievement in a game made outside the traditional publisher system. Team 17 sounds like a traditional publisher system. So does Devolver Digital. It is literally like if I were making a game, and I was like, I want a publisher. Team 17 and Devolver Digital are two things I'm applying to. Like, it's just like a sort of like a, they're like, I don't know, the most like publishers I can think of, like that I would ever approach. Okay, like, I get this. It's not EA where it's like uber massive or something like that, right? But I don't know. I like the idea of the independent game categorized like, oh, hey, we can show off what people have done with limited resources, and stuff like that, or like with essentially less help, right? But then I suppose Team 17 doesn't get like the benefits of having Frostbite engine, but then they have the benefits of being Team 17, which is like considerable compared to like people who don't. So I don't know. That bothers me a lot. It feels like a fake category, but that's all I got.
Sweet. A few chats from Kai. He says, "Is this the Dave the Diver problem?"
What is that?
I don't know.
Yeah, we're gonna look it up.
And then he said Devolver. I think that was in relation to something you're trying to remember.
Devolver.
And then he also says, I feel like indie publisher is an entirely oxymoron in that the ones identified as such tend to primarily seek out smaller studios that wouldn't have the resources to publish on their own.
Yeah. I don't know. It's incredibly strange, in my opinion. Dave the Diver is a game. I think this is actually nominated. Because this looks familiar, but I might have just missed it out when I was reading the nominations. He said Dave the Diver was a related question because it had such a large resource publisher. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, if I think about an independent film studio, I think of film studios that literally do not operate alone ever. Like, either they're operating in consortium with another independent studio, because we do have the same sort of thing where, like, people have a studio behind them, but, like, we still call it an indie film, you know what I mean? I think it's really just, if I think about like what I would consider those things, it would probably be something like that, where like a studio can't actually fund a movie on its own, so it either aligns itself with other independent studios to make it happen, aligns itself with the resource of the filmmaker to make it happen, or aligns itself with a large studio to make it happen, but is the primary studio, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
But
maybe that makes more sense for movies since they're just larger scale. Like it's a lot harder to make a movie, a critically acclaimed movie that because there's a lot of money involved. Just straight up.
Well, there's a lot of money involved in gaming too. I mean, in a lot of ways, gaming scale is much bigger than a movie. It's just that everything is kind of weird. like. I feel like a lot of times the way that games scale, I feel like they're not thought of the same at all, if that makes sense. I don't know, in the way they scale.
Okay. Maybe because there's a lot of just free tools you can use for video game development. Like you could do a lot for free,
But it's the same for movies. Like $1 million movie, you can actually make a pretty serious film for $1 million. Now, the average movie in the movie theater is not $1 million.
Wait, $1 million isn't free though.
Well, I'm saying if you had to make $1 million game, that's not anywhere near AAA at all.
That's pretty good though.
Well, I would feel the same way if I were making a feature and someone just gave me $1 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah. Anyway, it's interesting. Kai also says, less indie rep than Team 17, if I remember correctly. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. You want to transition us out?
Sure. Thank you for watching this segment of the Mixed Media Podcast. Stick around if you're watching live. We'll have Irving's segment.
Mixed Media Roller Coasters.
We're talking about roller coasters. Actually, I didn't know that. I was about to say, what are we talking about? Actually, just didn't look for some reason. We're talking about roller coasters. Does it connect to film at all, or is it just roller coasters?
It connects to art in general. Also.
Okay, cool. So this is still mixed media, but he was talking about the art of roller coaster. Oh, it says that on the screen, actually. Wow, I just said that without even realizing it. It says the art of roller coasters. Talking about that. Stick around, and once again, thanks for watching. Once again, shout out to our local supporters, Rob Sharma, 99 Crime, K Kairos, Alex Egbert, and Post. You can also support us if you'd like for $5 a month on the locals. You go to mixedmediapodcast.com and you find a link to where you can support us there, and you get some cool perks. So yeah.
Sweet. All right, and here we go.
Mixed Media Music.
Hello. If you've been watching along this whole time, thank you so much for keeping on watching our beautiful live show, our beautiful live stream podcast. If you're just tuning in, we should reintroduce ourselves before I talk about our topic here. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Sweet. And I just realized that our Discord stream, if you guys didn't know, we have a Discord, first of all, link in the description, or you could go to mixedmediapodcast.com. But the other thing is that we also stream this podcast in audio form only on Discord if you want to save bandwidth, or underrated, it's real time. Like, literally real time on there. But I just realized I had the wrong mic in. It was like my personal mic instead of the stream like virtual cable, if you get what I mean. So if anyone tried to tune in on there, sorry about that. I switched over now. But yes, today on Mixed Media we're going to be doing something completely and utterly different because I'm exhausted. I don't have the brain power to talk about the art form I truly love with all my heart, which is film. But I will talk about a different art form that most of y'all don't think of as an art form that I also love, but obviously the magnitude is completely different. And that is roller coasters. And so this episode, basically what I want to do is I want to sort of think about art forms in general, on the more abstract end, just briefly, and then we'll apply some of those things to roller coasters, talk about them, and hopefully you'll learn something and it'll be interesting. I'm going to be using the whiteboard significantly today, so if you didn't know, this right here is a live whiteboard. There you go. So I will be using that to illustrate a few things, and hopefully it'll be good. Okay. Cool. So, what sorts of things... Of course, defining what art is like a Herculean task, so I'm not going to attempt that. I'm also not going to attempt to define, beauty. Like, this is not that episode for that. One day I will talk about beauty from a Thomistic perspective, and if you're a nerd, you should definitely tune into that whenever I do get around to that. But for now, we're going to just take some broad strokes, broad stabs at it. So, what are some common features of different art forms? And I think, really, I'm looking here to distinguish an art form from another, right? So, if we think about films, which is what I typically like to talk about, you can't be a film if there's no picture. If there's no picture, it's not a film. Everything else, pretty much, can be deleted. But if there is no image, then it's not a film. Now you could say, well, I'm just going to put a picture, and there's going to be audio, and so you're going to sit there, look at the picture with audio. Is that a movie? Okay, a little bit more debatable, right? But like, if there's no picture, it's not a movie. That's just a clear boundary, I would say there's probably a temporal nature to movies that needs to be there as well, and that picture may or may not meet that requirement depending on how you parse that out. But anyway, getting off topic here. So that is effectively a constraint, right? So we have a constraint defining the art form. Also, for example, Kai says that's just a YouTube music upload. Exactly. I would assume Ben would say, if there's no sound, it cannot possibly be music. Is that debatable, Ben? I don't know.
What about a song with no notes?
I would say that's not music.
I mean, it depends. If is it like I like to. I know contentiously, but I like to think music is as intentionally ordered sound, but that includes like the lack of sound. And you could have like John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds of no sound, right? But like there's still intention there. The ordering is like an intentional non-ordering where it's supposed to call your attention to the sound of the music of life in the world around you, all right, and still like intentional. As a statement, right? I guess you can like put somebody in like a sound chamber, no sound. I don't know. I mean,
well,
music. I don't know.
There is a boundary at which you are not experiencing anything that could possibly be called music, probably, which is being in that sound chamber, probably, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously you need some silence, right? Like, to within your music, right? That's what the kind of if you just have sound, continuously, right? You don't have any space to breathe, but
yes. But yeah, yes, I think we're on the same page. Okay. Just a few chats. That was just clarifying. Alex Egbert says, "Can't wait for the Alec Baldwin picture, finger guns picture." I'm trying not to do things like that.
Happen. It can always be edited.
That is true. Maybe we'll make a meme just for our locals chat. Mixedmedia.locals.com. Anyway, okay. So what was I saying? So there are constraints. But there's also an important thing in art is context, right? So context always changes the way something is presented or enjoyed, right? So if you think about watching a movie in the contemporaneous to when it was filmed versus later, or watching a movie in a theater versus at home, or other art forms, you could sort of make any context at all, right? So there's context that changes your experience and the presentation. There's unity, which is one of my favorite. This is a sort of Thomistic concept, but I think it's maybe my favorite of all the Thomistic concepts of beauty, right? Is this idea that there's got to be some sort of coherence, basically. And a lot of postmodernists, they think they're cool and whatever, and they're like, the incoherence is the coherence. Well, that's unity still. Like there's still a unifying concept, right? Like the unifying concept is to be disunifying, or whatever however you want to put it. And if you think that's cool or interesting or whatever, like I guess that's cool or interesting, but it's still unity, right? So unity means there's some sort of principle, there's some sort of organizing aspect to it. It's not pure entropy, because pure entropy has no unity by definition, right? Okay. There's genre, there's which obviously we were talking about categories earlier and how hard it is to define things, but like in terms of there being discernible different sort of palettes or languages within an art form, right? There's even the way different sorts of people of different levels enjoy something. So even, whether you're young or old, whether you're I don't know, you're mature and immature, you're wherever, there's a certain amount of readiness, right, that one can have for a particular experience. There are dynamics, right, in art. At least the ability to have dynamics, even if the dynamics are flat. That's still a description of dynamics, right? There's a dynamic aspect of things. There's aging. So how something, that's kind of like context, but like, there's the way something feels when it just comes out versus later. And sometimes there's literal aging involved. So if you think about the art of winemaking or something like this, like there's literal aging involved in the process. There's innovation, right? So there's people who are trying to push boundaries and test things and try new things. Oftentimes these innovations happen early on in the art form, and then the good ideas sort of propagate in perpetuity. So there's this French concept in film called montage, right? which actually doesn't mean it's a little bit broader than what you might think it is, because we use the word montage today to mean those sequences in a film where the editing covers a lot of ground or a lot of maybe a lot like across a palette of something or whatever, where we're kind of taken out of the time sequence or the paced sequence of the film and into some clearly separate thing, edited to a clearly separate purpose, right? Montage actually is just the idea of editing images together at all, like which is basically like cutting to a different angle, even if it's in sequence temporally. That's not something that always existed in film. Obviously, it happened early on.
Yeah, but I like how, at least in Russian, when I watch like Russian films, always a person in the credits is like essentially montager, right? Mm-hmm. Like the person, like that's their job is like pasting these things together. Essentially, I assume that's what they do. I mean, I don't really know exactly what that role in like the Russian production system is, but you always see that, like, essentially that's what like it turns into, like montager.
Yep. So montage is an innovation, and now we see it's ubiquitous. Obviously, if someone cuts to different angles, no one's going to say that's crazy innovative today, but it was at some point. And then there's just the general mode of progress, right? And progress doesn't have to mean innovation per se, although I guess it kind of implies it. But I guess when we think of innovation, we think of big, structural differences in the way things are constructed. But I mean just the general movement of the art form. And a lot of times that has to do with if you're doing a general audience product, right, as you're often doing in film, oftentimes that has to do with what the audience can accept, right? So like if we go back to montage, the first filmmakers would have been like, oh, are they going to understand the spatial, are they going to have the spatial awareness to understand like what's going on? And these are legitimate questions because you need to habituate your audience into these sorts of tools. And imagine being back then and saying, wow, so innovative, this montage thing, and everyone else calling you a snob. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, is like, the general public gets accustomed to a thing and then you can sort of move forward. 180-degree rule is a more recent thing. Used to be pretty hard and fast until maybe 20 years ago, maybe 40 years ago or something like this. So that's a more recent, the audience is able to be spatially aware without the strict obeyance of the 180-degree rule. Anyway, so we have those things, and those are just examples, and I just want to put those examples in your mind so that we can accept what I'm going to put forth, which is that roller coasters are pieces of art. Okay, so here we go. What's a roller coaster in of itself? Like, what's its core thing, right? Clearly, for movies, the core thing is picture. What's the core thing about a roller coaster? If we were to ask Roller Coaster Database or the Golden Ticket Awards or similar institutional tools or institutions themselves what a roller coaster is, they'd probably give you a really broad definition that's basically something in which gravity acts upon a vehicle on a track. And that excludes like a train, right? Because it's powered all the way through by the vehicle itself. It's not gravity powered in any section of it, right? What other examples would we be excluding? I don't know. You get what I mean. Not everything with a rail is a roller coaster, but the rail is definitely required. If you took away the rail and you said, here is a coaster, here's an airplane, and it does maneuvers. Is that a roller coaster? No, because you need the rails, right? That's sort of the idea behind that. But of course, you have those edge cases where it's a little bit ambiguous. There are some powered coasters out there. They're children's coasters, almost by and large, because such a thing is terrifyingly dangerous if you did it on anything extreme. But there are powered coasters out there that seem to be coasters, but are actually powered, all the way through because they take a layout of a coaster, right? And people will argue about that. There are log flumes, right? Which are only coasters if they have a gravity-powered section guided by rails. So there are some log flumes that only have one drop that's like that. And the rest of it, it's like you're in water, right? And people will call that a water coaster. So, just like with every other thing, there are edge cases and endless debate and yada, yada, yada. So there's a thing which we're talking about. It has a constraint. It also has context, right? For example, if you look at that beautiful AI-generated coaster in the episode artwork, you'll see that we're doing what's called an expedition coaster, what's typically called an expedition coaster. Not that I asked it to do that, it just did that. And what that means is you're kind of going out of any particular... You're leaving civilization, right? You're going out and away. Now, obviously, with most expedition coasters, you're not literally leaving civilization, but you enter a wild thing. Like, you literally enter a forest, or... here, actually, I should pull stuff up. It's a highly visual art form, so we gotta show things on here so I can explain what I mean better. Let's pull up YouTube here. Let's see. And we would call that expedition coaster also... Expedition coasters are also a genre, right? Like, that's a genre of coasters. With, again, boundary cases that people will quibble about all the time, but generally accepted a core amount of rides that are always called expedition coasters. Let's see here if I can build up the Beast at Kings Island. And yes, I am a nerd, so I do know the names of a lot of coasters off the top of my head. There we go. Let's see here.
Do you think that coasters could be enhanced with the addition of music that goes along with the ride?
They often are. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, not often enough, like, not most coasters by any stretch of the imagination, but many coasters.
What about AR glasses?
There are some coasters like that too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. See here if I can make this look decent. Okay, there we go. I'm going to skip forward because this takes a while to get out into the wilderness. But my point is that there's a context in which this coaster feels different than others simply because even if we stripped away all other differences, we are going out into the wilderness. If you can see there from the drop, you can see that you're just going out into the forest, basically. Okay, what else do we have here? We have aging. And this ride itself actually is a good example of that too, in the sense that it's an old ride, really old. It was built a long, long time ago. But the ride changes over time because it's a wooden coaster, and when they get what's called retract, oftentimes characteristics of them change, like elements are taken slightly different. Sometimes parks are constantly improving these wooden coasters to make them better and better and better. And sometimes it's just about smoothness, right? So wooden coasters, especially, they get rattly over time. They get rough, which isn't necessarily as much of a negative word as it sounds to coaster enthusiasts. There's a such thing as too rough, and everyone has their tolerance, but roughness isn't necessarily inherently bad. makes the coaster feel well written, right? There's qualities to roughness and stuff like this. Anyway, there's innovation, obviously. This ride is really old, and we're doing maneuvers that are mostly tame, actually, and rather uninnovative. But if I were to pick a different
tame
coaster
in quotation marks.
What?
I mean, that's kind of a subjective how tame it is. Not everybody.
Oh, yes. I suppose so. That is true. But in the coaster world, we'd call this coaster mostly forceless, except for the very end of this coaster. Actually, let's skip to the end because it's so fun. At the end here, we have a beautiful, very famous ending to this ride where you go up a second lift hill and down into a helix that basically never ends, and is very forceful, almost blackout inducing for a tame ride for almost all the ride. There it is. Into these tunnels that apparently, if you really stretch, you can touch the walls, which is kind of a liability. But anyway. But if we take a different example here, you're going to see it looks entirely and utterly different. I'm going to actually go for as extreme of a difference as I can think of off the top of my head, which is X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain in California. Let's see here. Let's pick this one. Oh, the ads. And this one was made a lot later, but not as much later as you might think, maybe. The Beast might be the 70s. This was made in maybe 2000 or something like that. I can't remember. So let's see here if I can pull this up. So as you can see there, the ride vehicles are quite bizarre. And if we skip ahead here, let's skip ahead. This is the point of view of riding this thing. Considered one of the most intense.
Free spinning, or does it is motorized? Does it force you to look in a certain way, or how does it work?
It forces you to look in a certain way, otherwise it'd probably kill you. And it's actually not motorized. It's a third set of rails that guide the rotation, that control rotation.
Interesting. Okay.
This ride was so innovative, it bankrupted the company that made it. Because it was so... And the company was an experienced company, one of the most prominent companies. This ride bankrupted entirely. Any case, that's innovative. There we have a ride vehicle that rotates, based off of third rails on the track, right? And we've got a sense of progress, so you got a sense of motion. Today, that's not even a modern ride. I mean, obviously, its innovation is still so crazy, it still feels very fresh today. But the modern coaster, I guarantee you, if you haven't been to a park in a long time, you've never experienced a coaster like this. Hold on, some chats here. Miles asks Chester, what is the best roller coaster? I can't see the answer on the chat.
It broke. It basically it said, quote, "My apologies, but I'm a bit confused with what you're saying. Mind trying again?" And then spammed it 10 more times.
Okay.
Later in chat.
I missed something before then, actually. He said, oh good, I'm glad I'm not the only one that immediately thought of Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 in reference to this episode, Kai. Okay. And then Kai said, RCT2, but AI designs my coaster stream. Wait, that's actually a pretty fire idea. Oh my gosh. You gave me good content. I need to stream just stupid random stuff. There's so many random stupid things I could stream that would just be so fun and hilarious. I definitely got to do that. Okay, thank you. Alex says, I love how hilariously it breaks. Kai says, thankfully it doesn't propagate to the YouTube chat. Okay, gotcha. In any case, let's see here. So we see that there's a lot of the elements that I mentioned before, right? Of an art form, right? We've got a lot of the elements going on. But most people, when they think of a coaster, they don't think of aesthetic. That's not the first thing that comes to mind. It's not experiencing beauty. It's more like, I guess, sheer. There's a lot of raw emotions associated with emotions, whether it's fear, or it's just extreme excitement, or it's the love of adrenaline, even, right? Or something like this, right? One of the funniest things, if you look at roller coaster documentaries from the 90s, they like to use the word adrenaline junkies to refer to roller coaster enthusiasts, and I always thought that was hilarious. Because if you ever follow any roller coaster enthusiasts, your sensitivity to adrenaline goes down very, like, that's not the reason people like coasters, really. Because you kind of lose that the more you ride. Right. Anyway, so there you go. So, what are sort of the tools of this trade? And this is where we can have some fun. What are some of the tools I'm going to draw for this here? Oh, actually, no. I want to show. I forgot. I wanted to show like where the trend is now in roller coasters. This is by a company named Rocky Mountain Construction, which basically broke the game. It's like Kanye, right? Like like Kanye of roller coasters. If we can make the comparison. RMC, let's see, which one do we want to pick? Let's pick what I think, if I wrote it, would be my favorite coaster in the entire world, right? Maybe I should say favorite coaster in terms of layout and forces. Maybe if I were to consider other factors, that might not be the case. Let's see here. Oh my gosh, an ad on every video. Nice. Okay, there we go. Hold on. And these are hybrid coasters, so these are wooden supports with steel track, basically. And it's it's not a new concept, but this company has taken this concept in such a way that they've broke the game, if you get what I mean. There we go. And I guarantee you've never ridden anything like this. You've never felt anything like this. And it might be hard to tell on video, which is one of the wonderful things about coasters, is you can't digitize it whatsoever. It is a very raw physical experience.
I actually remember you showing me this coaster. I don't know what the context was, but I've seen this before.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. There we go. Okay, that's Zadra. I think Energylandia is in Poland, if I remember correctly.
What exactly about it is like different than like any other coaster? Like, it doesn't seem any crazier than any other thing. Like, honestly, watching like I don't like roller coasters, so I don't know. But like looking at something like Storm Runner or something, or in Hershey Park, seems like more intense than that.
So we're not talking about intensity per se, because Storm Runner. That's actually an interesting example that you brought up, because Storm Runner is a way older ride than this ride, but also was very innovative in of itself at the time. So it's kind of like, it's an interesting comparison, but it's not necessarily the intensity. There are elements on rides like this that have never been seen before, and I guess I'll talk about that, right now, basically. Okay. So, what are some of the tools of this trade? So, some of the factors that we have here in terms of how we can express ourselves by making a coaster, right? We can express something. Are material. This is not meant to be comprehensive, by the way, because this is there's a lot of depth in this art form, you know. So there's material. So this would be something like wood versus steel. as an example. It also could be the material of the wheels of the train, too. Let's see here. We've got contextual things, like how the coaster feels in different weather. So, on hot days, coasters run faster, by and large. In fact, over the course of a day, the coaster will run faster because the wheels will get hot. So the physics dictate that they run faster, and appreciably faster. There's a big difference. But also in the rain or in the cold. For example, the Beast, the first ride I showed you, is often considered one of the best night rides of all time as you go into the forest in the pitch black, basically. And you can smell the pine needles and hear the owls, right? You can look up at the stars, That's considered one of the best night rides ever, is the Beast. What other factors do we have? We have the restraint systems, right? So how are you held into the ride? Affects your ride experience massively. It's one of the biggest factors actually in your overall experience. If you're sitting down in a chair and this is your body here, and what's holding you in is just a lap bar, and that lap bar leaves some gap between the top and the bottom, you will more freely leave your seat, right? In moments of force, right? You have more room to move, versus something like, let's say something that restrains you from the shoulder, right? So this is you again. My drawings suck. I don't know what I'm doing. That's horrible. Let's start over here. Should have drawn the chair first. And this thing restrains you over the shoulder, basically. Well, you might actually increase your sense of security because you're pinned. It's touching more of your body. There might be a little less anxiety, especially if you're new to coasters. But you're going to be more constrained. You're going to be less free. The elements will feel different depending on how things are. For example, actually, let's continue on, and I think some of this will make a little bit more sense. There's the train style, right? So this really has to do... some of it has to do with the train itself, but there's the train... the way the train is constructed. So I'll just put train on here. But some trains are like buckets, where you sit in the bucket. There are seats in the bucket, and you sit in the bucket. And, those are sort of the more classic type trains. Then there are some trains that... I'll do this from the top down, which... This is not a seating position. These are seating positions. And the track goes here. So you're hanging off the sides of the track, right? That's called a wing coaster, right? Meaning that you are suspended basically over nothing, right? It's a completely different feeling simply because you're more exposed and you're off on the sides. You take the elements with different forces necessarily. Okay. There's even the support style, right? So if you remember Zadra, which I just played, there are the supports that hold up the track, right? These companies spend a lot of time, these designers spend a lot of time thinking about support style even, because it changes, one, the aesthetic of the coaster in the skyline of the park, which is extremely important. And is thought about way more than I think people think. I think people just go, oh, they just plop this here. No, they're thinking about how it looks on this path, how it looks on this path. They're looking to create something that's visually stunning as well, if it's a good, design. And they're also trying to affect your experience while on ride. So there's something called a head chopper, right? Which is just the nickname for when you are going through supports that look like they can chop off your head, basically. Because your sense of distance is distorted when you're going really fast. you're really actually pretty far away from those supports. Probably another, at the very minimum, another human length away from these supports. But when you're going so fast, they feel like they're just whizzing by right on, on the top of your head, right? Yes. Okay. So there's supports. Then there's the visual appeal, which I just talked about. There's also, which also has to do with color scheme and stuff like this. There's also the profiling of the track. And this is a complicated word that I won't go into terribly much. But this has to do with the minute shaping of the track. So something like Zadra I just showed you, for the most part, doesn't have intricate profiling in the sense that I mean, at least. Profiling has to do with the small undulations in shape of the track. It's mostly feelable on a wooden coaster, which tends to have, on the more complicated wooden coasters, they tend to be able to have a little bit more of a malleable feel to them. You can have like a slight, how do I describe this? You can add basically nuance and texture to the forces by changing the shape of the track just slightly. So if your overall element, let's just do it this way. If your overall element is just a hill, right? But the real shape of the hill, so it looks like that in aggregate, right? So the aggregate forces that it's going to add onto you is like a hill. It looks like a hill, but the profiling, if you really drill down to the particular shaping of the track, is something like, wow, that's really steep. It's something like, that, right? And I'm exaggerating so you can see better, but like it gets steeper on the other side of the hill, right, than it is on the front half of the hill. That's kind of like profiling, as best as I can explain it. But then there's also the layout, which is the sequence at which you take elements. Elements are kind of like scenes, almost. Like it's like a subset of the overall piece, right? So if we have a coaster that is just a bunch of hills, each one of these hills is an element, right? But the sequencing of the elements is part of the art form, right? So instead of a bunch of hills, you could have hill, loop, hill, right? I don't know if you're going back to like the 80s. So on and so forth. So we would call that the layout. Then there are other things too, like terrain. So if I have a cliff diving coaster, and those exist, that comes off of a cliff, that drop will psychologically affect me. Let's say even there's like let's say there's some hills off to the side. You're kind of going into a valley, let's say, right? That'll psychologically affect me different from something that just has that's just a plain what do you call those things? Dive coaster, right? So not on a cliff, right? We're not on any terrain. It's just plain. It's the structure itself. And then the last thing I'll talk about is theming, which is a very controversial topic in the coaster world. But theming is basically, does the ride have some lore behind it? Is there some effort put into the scenery? Something like this, like the beast, right? For example, its theming is literally you are some weird mythical beast that is rampaging through the woods. This is the beast you don't see in the woods, right? Kind of corny, but there are other coasters that have very revered theming and a pretty deep and detailed backstory with pre-shows and dark dark ride sections and stuff like this. Think about coasters at Disney, right, or at Universal. That tends to be the case where they have a lot more theming. Okay, so those are the examples I will give, but then we need to know how they affect us. So, and this is where we'll talk about forces, which is basically like the analogy to, I don't know, movements, push and pull in like a movie, or like pacing, right, in a movie. Like, this is where like a lot of the core building blocks of the piece are made, is in forces. So what forces do you have? Well, here's our coaster. It's on some track. So some forces you can have are, or maybe I should, so this is a zero force situation. And let's say we're taking a hill, our coaster's on the top of the hill. Zoom out here so I can see. It's taking it at a sufficient speed that law of conservation of momentum, right, says that, you know, things want to remain in the same direction that they were going at the same speed, all else being equal, right? Momentum equals mass times velocity, right? So the train is forced to follow the track, but you're not entirely, right? Does that make sense? So the train will take the hill, and your direction, or the train, the direction of momentum at this point will be like this. But then the train is going to somewhat, I mean, depending on the train design, the track design, or whatever, it might actually jump on the track a little bit. There's up-stop wheels that stop it from actually coming off the track. But some trains allow give like that. But you, if your restraints allow you to, will lift off the seat, right? So you will actually come off the seat because you're more free than the train to follow conservation of momentum, or the momentum of that upward momentum of the moment, right? And we call this airtime. Airtime. And in terms of physics, it's negative g's. We tend to force to refer to forces in g's, right? So just in relation to gravity, basically. So if you have 0 g's, technically they would still call it negative, because it's a little bit weird, because even though it's 0 g, it's negative with respect to stationary, right? I guess it would be negative 1 g related to, stationary. But it's 0 g's accounting for gravity.
Wait, I have a question then. So, oh, no, I see. Okay, I get it. It's interesting. It's kind of complicated because of the fact that one is like your sort of neutral G point, where it's like, so 0.5 G's and negative 0.5 G's are both negative G's.
Yes.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So 0 G's is you don't feel gravity, right? So the nickname for this is going to be floater airtime, because it feels like you're floating, right? It's like being in the space station for about 1 second, right? Or depending on the airtime hill, sometimes it could be 5 seconds of weightlessness feeling, right? Then let's say you go from the hill and you go into a valley. Well, now you've got, in aggregate, downward momentum, which means you're being shoved into the seat. This is what people think of when they think of G's from, like, a fighter pilot's perspective, right? Is that, like, pushing into the chair and, like, they're grunting and whatever. That's the same sort of directional G-force that we're doing here. And a lot of times this is referred to as intensity, which I think is a really stupid name. And I think most people think it's a stupid name, but that's just kind of the heritage. Intensity. And intensity can cause you to blood to drain from your brain, right? If you're like in an airplane and you're pulling G's or whatever, and you can pass out from positive G's. So it is a very intense experience. That's probably where it comes from. But that's intensity, and it's positive G's. I should say, on the negative G's perspective, let's say we're experiencing -1 G's, which would be a decent amount of airtime. This would be what we would call ejector airtime, because that's what it feels like. It feels like if the lap bar wasn't there, you would fly out of the train, which is physically true. So if there was no restraint, you would die. If in the ejector example, in the 0G example, you could actually just hold yourself in. You would be just fine. If your restraint came up and you didn't just like move yourself out of the train, if that makes sense. You could hold yourself in. -1 G's, you would have to exert -1 G's of holding power, right, to oppose the train, or to oppose your momentum, right? Does it make sense? Okay. Okay, so there's intensity, but what other forces could there possibly be? Well, we think of hills and valleys in terms of our basic roller coaster minds, but there's also lateral forces, which is when a train is rounding a corner, or making a turn. There's an angular change from a what do you call that? Yaw perspective, right? And that angular change results in an overall sideward force, and that's called a lateral. Then there's even more forces. Then there's forward and backwards forces. Forwards would be acceleration, right? Like you're accelerating, but the only forwards we tend to care about are at launches, because other accelerations are going to be maxed out at 1G, right? Because the most you could be doing under the power of gravity is a free fall, right? Does that make sense? And that's not really that special. So usually when you talk about acceleration, you're talking about launches. So the train is being launched, propulsed by something, forward and backwards. And this is just called acceleration. And then we still have more. We have something like, I don't know how to draw this one. I'm gonna fail utterly. Let's do it from the front perspective, because I think that's the easiest. So this is the train from the front, and we've got the force of rotation, basically, like this. So if the track rotates, the car rotates, you rotate, that exerts a force called whip, which is used awkwardly in other cases too, but that's neither here nor there. And whip we don't tend to quantify in G's or anything like that. There's not as much precision in talking about whip, but you'll hear people say that a ride was particularly whippy, or an element was particularly whippy, this, that, or the other. I think I got them all in terms of forces. These forces act on you to varying intensities. So how many G's? And sustainment, right? Or sustained, how sustained it is, right? So just seconds. So we know what the ride with the most airtime is in the world, and that is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point, right? A Cedar Fair park. We talked about the Cedar Fair Six Flags merger in the last news segment. And it has the most seconds of negative G's, basically, of any ride, if you just aggregate all the negative G's. It's also considered, the best ride in the world to a lot of people, basically. Okay. Now, you might be saying, well, this seems like people just seeking these things, right? They just want, like, if I made a ride, right, and I just, like, I'm going to erase all this. This is basically my point that I'm getting to here. Back in the olden days, it was mostly about the innovation, just like most art forms, right? So the first roller coasters didn't have restraints. So you couldn't actually exert, like, meaningful force, right? Or else people would pop out of the car and die. So, and roller coasters, by the way, is actually a very Americana art form. It originates here. It's, like, mostly expressed here in antiquity. It's like if you go to Europe and you look at coasters in Europe or something like this, they're all going to be like, by far, they're all going to be like they're going to be like 70s, right, plus. Whereas in the US, we're talking like 30s, 40s. So, like, the heritage is way stronger here in the US. Maybe even before, like, the first coaster was the 1800s. So anyway, we could do something very obvious, like the first coasters were, and we could put our train on the top, and we could just do that. And you're like, that should be great. That should be all you need, right? Because, like, I mean, Steel Vengeance is is considered a lot of times the biggest masterpiece of all time, or whatever, and it has the most airtime ever. And, like, airtime seems to be the thing that people talk about the most. And look how many positive G points we have. In turn, maybe these valleys are pretty intense, right? And so every time we get positive Gs, we get negative Gs afterwards. Wonderful. We've hit the dopamine. Right? But this is the same thing as saying, like, I don't know what the equivalent would be.
It's like trying to put like an easy formula to, like, music, movie, or video games, I guess, you know?
Exactly. And oftentimes, if we look back in the history of the other art forms, this is what the early forms of those things were, which makes sense. Because it's mostly experiment, right? In these cases, these trains they didn't even have lift hills. The person would literally shove it back all the way to the beginning, which is pretty funny. But if you made a coaster like this, and let's say it just pulled 0 Gs each time, wonderfully floaty ride, people will be like, that's fun, but it's not fulfilling. And when I say people, I don't mean the average person who rides a roller coaster, because the average person now is kind of like that person before a montage. Roller coaster as an art has progressed way slower in terms of general public, right, than most other art forms. Yet, for some reason, manufacturers, designers, parks seem really interested, although they do a very, very bad job of educating, and this is another point that I'll get to at the end. They seem to care a lot and be passionate about the things that most people won't notice, right? Because they're so busy being afraid. Does that make sense? And this is where the sort of analogy of the arts, I think, that I want to get at here is, which is, a lot of times people reduce art forms severely. They'll say something like, a movie is just its plot, right? Or a rock song is how hard it feels, or something like this, or, like, you know, how nasty the drop is. It's like reductive, right? Or I don't know. Take your pick of examples. A game is just how much your brain is occupied. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up, right? It's almost never the case that those things are actually fulfilling. It's like when I talked about coffee, which is basically the same analogy I'm making here, just with roller coasters. It's basically like someone saying, I just like eating raw sugar. No nuance. Sugar hits the dopamine. It's very, I mean, it does, right? It literally does. Factually, makes you feel all the goods, right? But no one actually wants to shovel raw sugar in their mouth all day. But here we have something that most people don't know what not raw sugar looks like. Or at least most people are like people who have never eaten anything sweet before. They bite into this gourmet donut. I think that was the analogy I used last time too. They bite into this gourmet donut and all they taste is sweet. They don't have the ability to differentiate because it's such an intense experience outside of the norm that there's no way to differentiate between what the frosting tastes like versus what the dough tastes like versus whatever like additives, like whatever, weird analogy, but you get what I mean, right? There's an inability to go beyond the intense. So what is the natural response to doing that? How do you become sensitive to it? You experience it. So instead of being reductive and saying, well, the movie's just about the plot, watch a bunch of movies that are not about the plot and see if you really hate them, actually. You can't see anything good in them, right? Ask yourself, why is this, even if I don't like it, why is it that this film seems to be in the classic film canon, right? This is not just popularity, we're talking about it. There's some sort of staying power behind it. There's some sort of importance to it that people attribute to it. Let me try to understand it, even if I don't like it at the end of the day. Coasters are a little bit different in that there is more, like if we're talking about sugar, this would be like the ultimate sugar, just because it engages so many faculties that are outside the norm. So for example, for me, I don't ride coasters that often, unfortunately. So every time I get back on a coaster, there's like a literal adjustment period that needs to happen where I do get adrenaline, right? Because it's just a natural bodily response to something so intense. I'm not the biggest fan of like staying at heights very long. I'm not afraid of heights, but like I don't really like naturally I feel this natural disinclination to be on a lift hill for 2 minutes going up to 200 feet, right? There's a natural disinclination to that. But then you ride like 2 times, 3 times in a day, the adrenaline goes away, the fear abates, and then you can pay attention to the more important parts of the ride, if that makes sense. You can go past the, wow, that's sweet, feeling, and you can get more into the nuance. So most coasters don't look anything like this at all. Most coasters that are considered good, I should say. I will say that there's such a thirst for airtime. Airtime is considered such a good quality of a coaster that you could do something close to this. But this is not going to get you all the way, right? So, I'm trying to think of a good example here. There's one of the most intense rides in the world. I'm from Jersey, so my home park used to be Great Adventure. And the second coaster I ever rode, the second children's coaster I ever rode, which was like late in high school or something like that. After my friend had to shove me on the coaster, so I understand the fear thing because I was very fearful. Was El Toro, which is one of the most intense rides in the whole world, which I didn't know at the time. My friend didn't know either because, just wasn't knowledgeable on the subject. But it's probably had no idea because I'm like, this one's shorter than the other one that I did before, so that must mean that it's less intense. That's not how physics works. That's not how physics works at all. There's angular change. There's a lot of minute detail. There's a combination of all those forces I listed before. You can have whip and airtime at the same time. You can have intensity and laterals at the same time, you can have them finely interchanging with each other at any given time, and the ride acts upon you in a very complex manner. So on El Toro, basically the first two hills are probably the most intense hills you'll ever experience in your life, probably the most intense hills in the world, which I didn't know at the time, again. And those two airtime moments are considered to be the crown jewel of El Toro. And the reason why it's like that is because the profiling of the track and the way the trains are and all the things combined lead to highly sustained, like probably negative 2 Gs. You know, you're probably through each airtime moment, you're like experiencing between negative, well, you're obviously going from 0 to 0, right? Just by necessity of a parabola. But you know, in terms of the intense moments of that coaster, you're feeling like negative 1 Gs at the height of it, negative 2 Gs, and then negative 1 Gs again, you know, for probably like 3-4 seconds, which is highly sustained. It's an experience that is very hard to describe. It feels like you're being launched into the stratosphere, and you literally feel like you can't help but try to hold yourself in, right? But my point is that the ride doesn't just do those two great things and then end. Or like just repeat it afterwards with like just more hills. The ride wouldn't be good if it ended here. It wouldn't even crack people's top 50, probably. It would be notable elements, maybe top elements in the world, but it wouldn't be, you know, the top ride in the world. The ride proceeds to dive in and out of its own structure twice. And then it proceeds to do what's called a spaghetti bowl section, which I don't remember how it goes, so I'm just going to do that. And then ends. And the whole thing throughout provides an overall unity of thought. You can feel the principle of unity behind the entire design of the ride. What do I mean by that? The ride has this very aggressive, very, for lack of a better analogy, bull-like, right? Because that's what it's named after, right? El Toro, the bull, right? It's like the bull tried to buck you off twice. This is just an analogy. I'm not saying that's what you think of when you ride the thing. I'm just trying to explain to you, because it's not something I can show you. It's something you can only feel. It's like you're trying to it's trying to buck you off twice, failed, and then is going to try to display its aggression on you by going through all these head choppers through the supports. And it's like, that's not enough. So the change-up is all these tight turns and laterals that provide laterals and intensity, right? So we've got a sequence that's like 2 powerful moments of airtime, a more psychological section that has some airtime in it, some laterals in it, but it's mostly about being in the structure of the thing. Then there's this low to the ground section that's mostly about a display of speed and agility, right? And it probably sounds weird to you that I'm describing it to you this way, but almost anything would sound weird to you if you weren't familiar with the core art form, right? That's what I'm trying to explain. You can other rides, their unity of principle is a display of whip, and all the ways whip can be felt. So you can have a ride that feels like it's trying to just be an essay on whip, if that makes sense. And it's trying to show you that whip can be felt in like 20 different ways. You know, first, really intense. Second, really slow. Third, I don't know, taken first slow, and then all of a sudden the rate of rotation changes, and then it slows down again, which feels utterly different. And the whole thing is extremely psychological. And this will be my last point here. Some of the most intense elements in the world, if you just measured the G-force, if you just isolated that element, it wouldn't look special on paper. It's like when you try to identify how beautiful a cinematographer's work is by saying, look how sharp the image is. It's kind of meaningless. Like, it doesn't actually mean, like how sharp the lens is just a purely technical observation. It's measurable and just a purely technical observation. So if we're talking about the hills on El Toro, it's not simply that they pull like -2 Gs at the top, although that's a huge deal, right? There are rides that have elements that feel spectacular that if you measured them, it's not a matter of how much force they're applying to your body in which directions. It's about the sequence, the setting, the support types, the context, the everything, right? Everything comes together and produces one output on you that's felt psychologically at the end of the day. You could be on a ride where its star moment only pulls 0 Gs on you. But it felt good because of the way the sequencing was done, because the ride spent a lot of time on positive Gs first, then gave you this sweet moment of relief. There's pacing on rides where the trend today is to have maximal pacing, right? Which is the Zadra, the ride I showed you, has like basically maxed out pacing. There's always something happening. There's always a change of angle. There's always forces acting on your body. But there are other rides that are more graceful, and it feels like you're flying. You feel free, right? It's not so much about the forces as much as it is about this feeling of soaring, right? Which kind of creates, like, some rides kind of can create a feeling even, right? Like, you're like, it's just so different from what you experience normally. And you're like, if I could fly, this is what it would feel like, right? So on and so forth. So, my point here is that you can be reductive about anything. And there are a lot of things that I think are more aesthetically driven. And like I said, the coaster world really cares about this. You know, you might think that, these parks, they just put something that... I mean, there's an element of it where there's marketability, right? Just like with anything else. You know, there are gimmicks in the coaster world. They're abundant, right? But there are gimmicks everywhere else, and there's marketability everywhere else. But at the end of the day, the people who make these things today don't view themselves as much as engineers as they view themselves as artists, if that makes sense. The designers. And just like in the early days of most art forms, those people were mostly engineers. You know, the person who invented film was Thomas Edison. Like, that guy's not an artist at all, right? But it transcends its own technological definition and finds meaning in the Thomistic principles that I'll talk about in some other day, right? That define aesthetic. So there you go. And I encourage you, if you find any of that interesting, go ride some rides. And they don't have to be big rides. Just go ride some random rides and, like, see if you can think about it that way, just as an exercise, even if you just end up going, wow, what a stupid nerd who talked about coasters on this podcast. That's fine. But I'm just saying, it's nice when you can sit back and open your horizons to more of what humanity has to offer you in the realm of beauty, which is kind of what I wanted to do with this podcast in general, right? Is to really enrich everyone's life by thinking of art in a much more holistic and broad sense, in a way that impacts your day-to-day. So there you go. That's my segment.
Nice. Roller coasters is art. Sick.
Sweet. If you have a favorite coaster, or anything like that, definitely let me know on the Discord. Link in the description. I have not ridden, like, many coasters in the grand scheme of people who like coasters. Most coaster enthusiasts, they, like, literally take park tours around the world, around the country, around the world. There are people with 300 credits is what they call it, right? 300 credits, 400 credits. People really go at length to go experience these things. Oh, I should say, there's one more thing I had to say. Sorry. The last thing I had to say was, because coasters progressed a lot slower than most art forms, they're in a spot right now where they're kind of at a turning point where the gimmick is starting to fade for the nuance, but the parks don't know how to do that from a marketing perspective, right? Like, they don't know how to, like, market something more nuanced, because they haven't been doing that. They were like, look at this 300-foot drop, look at this, like, you know what I mean, like that's their marketing, which it reduces the experience. But then now the innovation is happening in the nuance, and now they're like, we don't know how to market this properly other than look at it, and hopefully you'll
they don't really have like terminology for the type of experience you were saying before, like with the food analogy, right? Where you can say something sugary or whatever, kind of like, or sweet, which is, you know, kind of like how you can measure something technically about a roller coaster or something, right? Same way you can measure the amount of sugar in something, or measure the amount of whatever ingredient. But like, I don't know, there are certain combinations of things that, like, I don't know, lead to like a like what's like a or like a scent. I'm thinking like an earthly scent, right? It's not really easy to measure that, you know, per se, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or a sweet scent, which could come from something that's not actually measurably sweet, you know, or, you know, whatever it is, maybe something like that.
I'm trying to think though, like if you look at like candy advertising, does anybody advertise anything actually about the candy? Like, you know, the biggest advertiser I can think of is like Reese's, right? But they don't actually like, M&M's too, but they don't actually like advertise anything about a Reese's peanut butter cup. It's just like, you want a Reese's peanut butter cup? Yeah, you do. Like, that's the marketing.
That's probably says something about like what they're going after is, like, if they're not going after like you're, you know, like, oh, it like tastes good or something like that, which, you know, does, but, you know, that's not. It's, you're having this craving right now.
It's addiction.
So
it's marketing addiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like what's the Snickers like? Alright, it's like, you're not you until you've had a Snickers or something. Like, it doesn't tell you anything about the experience of eating a Snickers. Like, why you should like the complex, you know, chocolate, caramel, and nut combination that they offer versus like a Milky Way.
But the crazy thing though is that, like, in the candy world, they all, like, if you were to actually like go eat some real candy, like, from someone who actually really cares about candy, you'd be like, what the on earth are they feeding me? Like, you'd feel like, what the heck is this garbage? And that's really what it comes down to, is they're trying to out volume everyone else by addiction, you know, basically, or craving, or whatever, however you want to put it, you know. Kai says Snickers should hire Ben. But the motive is completely different. It's not the peanut butter in this Reese's cup. It was single origin sourced, you know, so that you can taste this particular varietal or something like this. But believe it or not, there is candy like that. Not that I've had any of it, but I definitely know of it. And perhaps if we were to experience too much of that, a lot of these companies would go under. So my basic premise is always, you know, go away from those people. Those people are bad.
I mean, I guess you could look at it, I don't know if it's so much from marketing, but I think of the Charmery, the ice cream place, the tiny ice cream place that opened, like, I think it opened right before Irving, you and I started at Hopkins, and now it has like 5 locations throughout Maryland, and, you know, like, the other week they're offering another round of these like full sensory movies with Home Alone. Now they just finished their run of E.T. and like I took a tour of their ice cream production factory. What? Oh, you missed this. You missed this, Nathan. Yeah. They show, this is a new concept of theirs. They're selling out these things. They like show a classic movie and like have, you pay like $30 and you get like themed food and specially prepared, you know, themed ice cream for different parts of different scenes of the film. And I don't know.
Does the ice cream, they give it to you at that time? Because it's gonna melt if it just stays there, right? How's it?
Yeah, I think what this is like, you know, designed to go with like different flavors and different other like non-ice cream foods are designed to go with particular scenes.
I see. Okay, that's interesting.
I don't know exactly how it works, but yeah, like that's like an example. Like, I don't know. I took their tour too of like their production, facility, and like I don't know. It's like it's not the healthiest ice cream in the world, but they make their name by like all sorts of wacky flavors that they come up with, and, like good flavors, and but
yeah. Everyone has that.
Like the stuff you're gonna buy in a store in bulk.
Yeah, like there are certain art forms in which we've already progressed past. Look at this X. Like we're past the point in movies where like look at this picture, and all you have to say is it's a movie, and people just want to see it. You know what I mean? Like that's just about it. Maybe you add a few like descriptors, like look at this intense movie or a thrilling movie, and that's all you've got to say. We're past that, and no one could sell a movie like that. But in certain other things, like in candy, which is way older of an art form, it's because those big companies decimated the candy shops. So we don't know what that's like anymore. But for coasters, it's more like it's not like that. It's more like we're at a turning point where we've sufficiently gone past like the super innovative. Like we've a lot of things have been done, not everything, but like a lot of things have been done, and we're kind of at that like weird part in the S curve where we're rolling over, in terms of innovation in coasters. There's still plenty to do, but the future looks like nuance, and you're like, you've got to figure out how to capture that. If you don't capture it, you will never create a culture. If you never create a culture, you'll die. So,
just to go back to movies. Maybe this is closing it too, but you say that we've kind of some people in the industry have made that mistake. It's like, oh, it's a Marvel film, watch it.
Yep. Exactly. In fact, I think most of the industry just expects people to come based off of some IP, and that isn't gonna work for very long if it's not working anymore, frankly.
That's what I'm saying about Ubisoft. It's like their new strategy now. It's like, ooh, Avatar, play it.
Exactly. Cool. Well, if you enjoyed this rather weird take, first of all, smash the like button, please. Please, it's free. Like, there's literally a button on your computer that's just there and it's unclicked. If you're on Rumble or on YouTube, does Twitch have a like button? I can't remember.
Twitch does not have a like button. No.
Okay, well, not if you're on Twitch. But if you're on the other two platforms, there's a button that you can press right now that is literally just digital. Clicking it does nothing to you. And if you found any of this remotely interesting, at least hit the like button so that we can do more of this and more people can see the stuff. Then if you want to go beyond that and hit another button that doesn't hurt you at all, you can hit the subscribe button, and we don't flood your inbox whatsoever. It's a once a week live stream show. We're not spamming your inbox with shorts or other things like that. It's pretty simple. Every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, hit the subscribe button if you want to know when. Gonna get a notification when the next show comes about, and you want to know what topics we're going to be discussing. Every single platform that we're on shows the topic. Oh, minus Twitch, I think. Twitch is weird. Shows the topic before we start streaming, and you can get your thoughts in order or whatever. That being said, too, you can also check out the link in the description to our Discord, which is free to join, and that costs you a little bit more because then you have another server on your thing. I get that. But you could always pop in, and then we won't be at all insulted if you're like, this is whack, and then pop out. But at least pop in for a moment, have an argument, or share a thing, or click a link, or whatever you want to do. The Discord's pretty lit, so check the link in the description to the Discord. And then finally, the only thing that will hurt you at all in the wallet is if you want to go to mixedmedia.locals.com. If you really, really enjoyed it and want to perpetuate the content, you can go to mixedmedia.locals.com and support us on there. We have 5 awesome supporters: Kai, Alex Egbert, Post, 99 Crime, and Rob Sharma supporting us there for just $5 a month. You can see the perks at mixedmedia.locals.com. We have an exclusive local chat, which is super fun, on Discord. So definitely check that out. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And I don't know, I like just talking about stuff. It's just fun. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed our little powwow session too. So yeah, that's all. I think that's all I got. I don't have anything else.
Yeah, thanks for watching and listening to us.
Thanks for watching.
All right, bye. Oh, that's the intro. I did it bad. Hold on. Outro.
Look, tell a man no trouble. I don't want beef, man. I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then I'm on side. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas is. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We pack, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vipers.